Everyone in the ballroom expected Charlotte Hayes to cry. That was the cruel beauty of London society. It could destroy a woman's reputation with nothing more than a whisper, then gather politely to watch the wreckage. On that cold February evening in 1852, beneath crystal chandeliers and the golden glow of hundreds of candles, more than 200 members of England's aristocracy had assembled at the Ashcombe Charity Ball. Officially, they had come to support widows and orphan children. Unofficially, they had come to witness a scandal. Charlotte stood alone at the center of the grand ballroom while conversations hushed around her like a tide retreating from shore. Silk gowns rustled. Fans fluttered. Curious eyes followed her every movement. No one approached. No one offered comfort. No one dared stand beside the woman currently being blamed for the season's most shocking disgrace. Lady Victoria Harrington watched from across the room with satisfaction carefully concealed behind a sympathetic smile. The performance was flawless. Most people believed it. Charlotte knew that was exactly the point. She kept her shoulders straight. She refused to lower her gaze. If she had learned anything during her 28 years of life, it was that dignity often became a person's final possession. Once surrendered, it rarely returned. A violin sang softly above the murmur of voices. The musicians continued playing because society always preferred elegance, even during cruelty. "Poor thing," a woman whispered nearby. She should have admitted her mistake weeks ago. If she had any sense of shame, she would not have shown her face tonight. Perhaps she hoped someone will defend her. The three ladies exchanged amused glances. Charlotte pretended not to hear. Experience had taught her that responding only encouraged people. Silence denied them satisfaction. She focused instead on the enormous ballroom surrounding her. The Ashcombe residence was among the most impressive houses in Mayfair. Marble columns lined the walls. Massive mirrors reflected the candlelight until the room seemed filled with stars. Fresh flowers imported from greenhouses in Kent decorated every corner. The scent of roses lingered beneath the perfume of expensive guests. Everything appeared beautiful. Everything felt cold. "Miss Hayes." Charlotte turned. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe approached cautiously. As hostess of the evening, she wore a pale silver gown and an expression caught somewhere between kindness and discomfort. "I am pleased you accepted my invitation." Charlotte offered a polite smile. "Thank you for including me." Eleanor hesitated. "There has been discussion." "There usually is." A faint flush touched Eleanor's cheeks. "You understand what I mean." Charlotte understood perfectly. Invitations had become rare during recent months. Some households no longer acknowledged her existence. Others invited her specifically because they wanted entertainment. Society enjoyed observing fallen reputations almost as much as it enjoyed creating them. "I appreciate your concern," Charlotte said gently. "But I assure you, I have survived worse evenings." Eleanor's eyes softened. "I hope that is true." Before Charlotte could respond, movement near the ballroom entrance captured everyone's attention. Conversation stopped. Even the orchestra faltered. A ripple passed through the crowd. Then silence settled over the room. Charlotte did not need to look immediately. She already knew what had happened. Only one person in London could command that sort of reaction without speaking a single word. The Duke of Blackthorn had arrived. She glanced toward the entrance. Nathaniel Ashcroft stood framed beneath the archway, tall and composed, his dark evening coat fitting him with military precision. At 35, he carried the reputation of a man who rarely smiled and never forgot an insult. His title was ancient. His fortune enormous. His influence stretched from Parliament drawing rooms to remote country estates. Some called him intimidating. Others called him ruthless. Most called him dangerous. Few dared call him anything at all. A footman announced his arrival despite the fact that everyone already knew who he was. His Grace, Nathaniel Ashcroft, Duke of Blackthorn. The title echoed through the ballroom. Mothers immediately straightened their daughters' shoulders. Young ladies adjusted curls and ribbons. Gentlemen became suddenly attentive. It happened every time. Nathaniel acknowledged the gathering with a brief nod. Nothing more. He moved through the room as if entirely unaware of the effect he created. Charlotte watched him only long enough to satisfy curiosity. Then she looked away. She had encountered powerful men before. Admiration had never improved her circumstances. Across the room, Victoria Harrington stepped forward. Her smile brightened. Her posture softened. Every movement appeared effortless. Charlotte almost admired the skill involved. Victoria knew exactly how to attract attention without appearing to seek it. Nathaniel greeted several guests. Victoria soon joined the circle surrounding him. Laughter followed. A comfortable scene. An expected scene. Charlotte returned her attention to a nearby painting. It depicted a peaceful countryside landscape. The artist had captured sunlight beautifully. She found herself studying the brushwork simply because it was preferable to watching people watch her. "You seem remarkably calm." The deep voice startled her. Charlotte turned. Nathaniel Ashcroft stood beside her. She had not seen him approach. The ballroom suddenly felt quieter despite the music continuing in the background. Several nearby conversations died instantly. "Your Grace," Charlotte said. "Good evening." Grey eyes studied her carefully. "Most people in your position would avoid public gatherings. Most people are probably wiser than I am." Something almost resembling amusement flickered across his face before disappearing. "Perhaps." Charlotte waited. Powerful men rarely initiated conversations without purpose. Nathaniel seemed no exception. "You are aware of what people are saying." It was not a question. "Very aware. Yet you came anyway." "I received an invitation." Many would have declined. Charlotte met his gaze evenly. "Then many would have disappointed Lady Ashcombe." A brief silence followed. She sensed curiosity behind his expression. Not warmth. Certainly not admiration. Curiosity. Like someone examining a puzzle. "You value appearances," he said. "No." Charlotte smiled faintly. "If I valued appearances, I would have stayed home." For the first time, Nathaniel appeared genuinely interested. Before he could answer, Victoria arrived. "Your Grace." Her voice flowed smoothly between them. "Everyone has been wondering where you disappeared." She acknowledged Charlotte with impeccable politeness. "Miss Hayes." Charlotte returned the greeting. Victoria linked her arm lightly through Nathaniel's. The gesture seemed innocent. It was not. Every woman in London understood the message. Charlotte also noticed the satisfaction hidden behind Victoria's smile. "Interesting. The musicians are preparing the next waltz," Victoria said. "Would you care to join me?" Nathaniel glanced briefly toward Charlotte before returning his attention to Victoria. "Of course." They departed together. Charlotte watched them cross the ballroom. Then she released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Strange. The exchange should have meant nothing. Yet something about Nathaniel Ashcroft unsettled her. Perhaps it was his directness. Perhaps it was the feeling that he observed more than he revealed. Neither quality inspired comfort. An hour passed. Dancing continued. Refreshments circulated. Rumors multiplied. Charlotte endured all of it with practiced patience. She spoke with elderly widows. Discussed literature with a retired colonel's wife. Avoided conversation she knew would lead nowhere useful. The evening remained tolerable until Lord Pembroke arrived. The elderly baron possessed two unfortunate qualities. He enjoyed gossip and lacked discretion. Combined, they made him dangerous. "Miss Hayes." He bowed dramatically. "How brave of you to attend." Several people immediately began listening. Charlotte recognized the trap. "Thank you, Lord Pembroke. I must confess, he continued loudly, I was uncertain whether society would see you again after recent events. Nearby guests exchanged eager glances. There it was. The spectacle they had been waiting for. Charlotte maintained her composure. Society has survived greater scandals than me. A few people laughed quietly. Lord Pembroke frowned. Even so, one wonders whether silence implies guilt. The room seemed to tighten. Charlotte felt dozens of eyes settle upon her. She could respond. She could defend herself. She could explain. Yet experience suggested explanations rarely changed minds already committed to a conclusion. One also wonders, she replied calmly, whether assumptions imply wisdom. The laughter returned, louder this time. Lord Pembroke's face reddened. Across the ballroom, Nathaniel Ashcroft observed the exchange. Charlotte noticed him immediately. Not because he moved. Because he did not. He simply watched. Evaluating. Measuring. Judging. The realization irritated her more than she expected. She looked away first. Near midnight, the orchestra paused for refreshments. Guests dispersed into smaller groups. Charlotte stepped onto a balcony seeking fresh air. The February wind carried a sharp chill through the darkness. Below, carriage lamps glowed along the street. London stretched endlessly beyond them. Beautiful. Indifferent. Alone at last, she rested her hands against the stone railing. For a few precious moments, nobody stared. Nobody whispered. Nobody expected anything. You hide it well. Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. Apparently solitude remained impossible. She turned. Hide what, Your Grace? He stepped onto the balcony. Candlelight from inside framed his features. How much this affects you? Charlotte considered denying it. Instead she chose honesty. Would it matter if it did? Nathaniel did not answer immediately. Perhaps. She studied him carefully. The wind stirred loose strands of her chestnut hair. Somewhere below, a carriage rolled across wet cobblestones. Then perhaps you should decide whether I deserve your judgment before wondering how I feel about it. Something changed in his expression. Not enough to name. Enough to notice. Before either could continue, the ballroom doors opened. A servant approached hurriedly. Your Grace. Lady Harrington has been searching for you. Nathaniel nodded. The servant withdrew. Silence lingered. Then Nathaniel spoke. Good evening, Miss Hayes. Good evening, Your Grace. He returned inside. Charlotte remained on the balcony. The cold no longer bothered her. What bothered her was the unsettling certainty that this evening had changed something. She did not know what. She only knew that Nathaniel Ashcroft had looked at her differently than everyone else had. Not kindly. Not cruelly. As though he believed there was a truth hidden beneath the scandal. Unfortunately, he was not the only one searching for it. And somewhere inside the crowded brilliance of Ashcombe House, someone was already preparing the next move. The game had begun. Charlotte simply did not know she was the intended target. The following morning arrived beneath a blanket of grey clouds that hung low over London. Rain threatened but never fully committed. The city seemed suspended between storm and sunlight, uncertainty and expectation. Charlotte Hayes understood the feeling all too well. She sat beside the drawing-room window of her modest townhouse in Bloomsbury and reviewed correspondence that had accumulated over the past week. 3 invitations had quietly disappeared. 2 acquaintances who once addressed her warmly now offered only formal notes. 1 committee chairwoman had informed her, with exquisite politeness, that her presence would no longer be required at future charitable events. Reputation, Charlotte reflected, was remarkably fragile. Years to build. Days to destroy. Her aunt, Mrs. Margaret Hayes, entered carrying a silver tea tray. At 62, she possessed the practical wisdom that often came from surviving disappointment. She placed the tray on a nearby table and studied her niece carefully. "You did not sleep." Charlotte smiled faintly. "I slept enough." "That means no." Charlotte folded a letter and set it aside. There seemed little point in pretending otherwise. Margaret settled into a chair opposite her. Ashcombe House was unpleasant. Charlotte considered the question. Unpleasant felt inadequate. Humiliating was more accurate. Dangerous might have been better. Yet neither description captured the strange undercurrent that had followed her home. The memory of Nathaniel Ashcroft lingered in her thoughts despite her efforts to dismiss it. "Predictable," she answered finally. "Which is often worse." Margaret sighed. People can be cruel when they are frightened. Frightened? Of scandal. Of association. Of becoming the next target. Charlotte could not disagree. Society rarely punished cruelty. It rewarded distance. Supporting an unpopular person carried risks. Condemning one carried none. A knock interrupted their conversation. Moments later, a servant entered carrying a sealed envelope. A messenger delivered this, Miss Hayes. Charlotte accepted the letter. The heavy cream paper immediately caught her attention. So did the wax seal pressed into the back. A black hawk surrounded by a crown of thorns. Her pulse slowed. Blackthorn. Margaret noticed it as well. The Duke. Charlotte broke the seal carefully. A single sheet lay inside. The handwriting was precise and controlled. "Miss Hayes, your attendance is requested at this afternoon's meeting of the Ashbourne Relief Committee. Certain concerns have arisen regarding recent financial records. As patron of the organization, I believe clarification is necessary. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Duke of Blackthorn." Charlotte read the note twice. Then a third time. "What does he want?" Margaret asked quietly. Charlotte folded the letter. "Officially?" "Clarification." "And unofficially?" Charlotte stared toward the rain-darkened street outside. "I suspect judgment." The meeting took place at 2 o'clock in the committee offices near Grosvenor Square. The building itself was respectable without being grand. Its purpose was charitable administration rather than social display. Charlotte arrived precisely on time. Several committee members were already present. Their reactions upon seeing her ranged from discomfort to open suspicion. Lady Agnes Pembroke avoided eye contact entirely. Mrs. Winfield offered a polite nod. 2 younger women whispered behind carefully raised hands. Charlotte took her seat and waited. 10 minutes later, Nathaniel Ashcroft entered. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Conversations ended. Chairs straightened. Attention focused. Power often announced itself without words. The Duke carried that sort of presence. Nathaniel acknowledged the room before taking his place at the head of the long table. "Thank you all for attending." His voice remained calm. Controlled. Difficult to interpret. Recent concerns regarding the committee's educational fund require review. Charlotte felt dozens of eyes move toward her. There it was. The reason for the meeting. Lady Agnes cleared her throat. Certain discrepancies have caused understandable concern. Understandable concern. What an elegant phrase. It sounded far better than accusation. Nathaniel folded his hands. "Let us proceed carefully." Lady Agnes nodded. Several months ago, responsibility for distributing scholarship grants was delegated to Miss Hayes. Charlotte remained silent. Unfortunately, Lady Agnes continued, questions have arisen regarding one recipient. Murmur spread through the room. Nathaniel's expression did not change. Continue. A ledger was placed upon the table. Pages turned. Numbers appeared. Dates. Transactions. Signatures. Charlotte recognized them all. She had reviewed those records repeatedly during the previous weeks. Miss Charlotte Hayes authorized funding for a student named Thomas Weller. Lady Agnes pointed toward a specific entry. Subsequent investigation revealed familial connections between the recipient and Miss Hayes. The accusation landed exactly as intended. Gasps followed. Curious glances. Quiet judgment. Charlotte kept her face composed despite the tightening in her chest. Nathaniel's gaze settled upon her. Is this true? The room waited. Charlotte answered calmly. The recipient's mother once worked for my family. Several committee members exchanged meaningful looks. The distinction mattered. Unfortunately, most people preferred implications over facts. Lady Agnes seized the opportunity immediately. You neglected to disclose that relationship. Because there was no relationship requiring disclosure. That is a matter of interpretation. Charlotte looked directly at her. No. It is a matter of policy. The room grew still. Lady Agnes flushed. Nathaniel opened the ledger. Explain your decision. Charlotte had prepared for this moment. She reached into her reticule and withdrew several documents. Thomas Weller achieved the highest examination scores among all applicants. She placed the papers before him. His references were exceptional. His financial need was verified independently. The scholarship committee approved his selection unanimously. Nathaniel reviewed the pages. Silence stretched across the room. Charlotte observed him carefully. Unlike many men in positions of authority, he actually read the evidence presented to him. That should have reassured her. Instead, it made the outcome feel more important. After several minutes, Nathaniel set the documents aside. The qualifications appear legitimate. Relief flickered briefly through the room. Then Lady Agnes spoke again. Even so, appearances matter. There it was. The true issue. Not facts. Not policy. Appearances. Charlotte felt exhaustion settle over her shoulders. Of course they do. Lady Agnes leaned forward. Given recent rumors, perhaps Miss Hayes should step aside temporarily. For the committee's reputation. A few members nodded. Others avoided involvement entirely. Nathaniel remained silent. Charlotte suddenly understood something. The meeting had never been about scholarships. It had never been about children or education or charity. It was a public test. Another opportunity to see whether she would bend. Whether she would apologize. Whether she would quietly disappear. Miss Hayes. Nathaniel said. Charlotte met his gaze. Grey eyes regarded her with frustrating neutrality. Do you wish to respond? The room waited again. Charlotte stood slowly. Her chair scraped softly against the floorboards. I would like to ask a question. Nathaniel inclined his head. Proceed. She looked around the table. How many of you believe I intentionally abused my position? No one answered immediately. Several people looked uncomfortable. Others stared at their hands. Lady Agnes remained stubbornly silent. Charlotte nodded once. Interesting. She turned toward Nathaniel. And you, Your Grace. The question surprised everyone. Including him. For the first time, a faint tension appeared in his expression. Barely visible. Still there. This meeting is not about personal opinions. Everything in this room is about personal opinions. Silence followed. Charlotte continued before anyone could interrupt. The records are accurate. The decision was justified. The student earned the scholarship. Her voice remained calm. Steady. Yet none of that matters because people have already decided what kind of woman I am. Lady Agnes shifted uncomfortably. Charlotte saw it. Others saw it as well. Miss Hayes, Nathaniel said quietly. Be careful. Charlotte almost laughed. Be careful. She had spent months being careful. Months remaining polite while strangers dismantled her reputation one conversation at a time. Carefulness had accomplished very little. I am being careful. She looked directly at him. What I am not being is silent. The room felt suddenly smaller. Warmer. More dangerous. Nathaniel rose from his chair. The movement immediately commanded attention. Then answer this. His tone remained composed. Professional. Do you understand why these concerns exist? Charlotte knew exactly what he meant. Did she understand why people questioned her character? Did she understand why society distrusted her? Did she understand why rumors carried more weight than evidence? Of course she understood. She lived with it every day. Yes. Her answer came softly. I understand perfectly. Nathaniel studied her for several long seconds. Then he spoke words that settled heavily across the room. In that case, perhaps an acknowledgement would help resolve the situation. The meaning was unmistakable. Not an admission. Not exactly. Something softer. A statement designed to satisfy public expectations. A concession. A surrender wrapped in polite language. Several committee members visibly relaxed. They expected compliance. Charlotte felt disappointment twist unexpectedly inside her. Not because of the request itself. Because it came from him. She had almost convinced herself Nathaniel Ashcroft valued truth more than appearances. Clearly she had been mistaken. An acknowledgement, she repeated. Yes. Charlotte looked down briefly. Her hands remained steady. Then she raised her head. No. The single word echoed through the room. Shock followed immediately. Lady Agnes stared. Mrs. Winfield nearly dropped her spectacles. Someone inhaled sharply. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. No. I will not apologize for something I did not do. Charlotte gathered her documents. Nor will I pretend guilt simply because honesty has become inconvenient. The silence that followed felt absolute. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Not dramatically. Just enough. That position may carry consequences. Charlotte held his gaze. Then I will accept them. Neither looked away. Seconds passed. Then something shifted. Nathaniel's attention briefly dropped toward her hands. Specifically toward her left wrist where the sleeve of her glove had moved slightly while collecting the papers. His expression changed. Very slightly. Charlotte followed his gaze. A faint mark remained visible before she quickly adjusted the glove. The moment lasted no more than a heartbeat. Yet something about it unsettled her. Nathaniel returned his attention to her face. The room still waited for his verdict. Finally he spoke. Very well. His voice revealed nothing. The matter remains under review. Charlotte inclined her head politely. Thank you, Your Grace. She turned and walked toward the door. No one attempted to stop her. No one offered support. The familiar pattern repeated itself. Behind her, conversations began almost immediately. Questions. Speculation. Judgment. Charlotte left the building without looking back. Rain had finally begun falling. Small drops darkened the cobblestones. Carriages rolled past beneath grey skies. She drew her cloak tighter and started walking. Across an upstairs window, Nathaniel Ashcroft stood motionless, watching her disappear into the crowd. He should have been thinking about committee finances. About evidence. About procedure. Instead, his attention remained fixed on a single unsettling detail. The brief glimpse of an old mark hidden beneath a glove. A mark that looked entirely out of place. And for the first time since the scandal began, he found himself asking a dangerous question. What if Charlotte Hayes was not the person everyone believed her to be? By the end of the week, Charlotte Hayes had become one of the most discussed women in London. The distinction brought her no satisfaction. Rumors moved through drawing rooms faster than truth ever could. They crossed Mayfair before breakfast, reached Kensington by luncheon, and arrived in Belgravia before dinner. Each retelling added something new. A suspicious glance became evidence. A misunderstanding became a confession. Silence became proof. Charlotte learned of most versions second-hand. Some were almost creative enough to admire. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, she sat in the reading room of the British Museum, reviewing several historical journals requested by a local schoolmaster. The vast hall offered a rare refuge from society. Books cared little for scandal. Ancient manuscripts did not whisper behind fans. For 2 peaceful hours she managed to forget herself entirely. Then she noticed the stairs. They began gradually. A gentleman studying geography glanced toward her 3 times in 10 minutes. 2 ladies near the eastern shelves exchanged murmurs before leaving abruptly. Even here, among scholars and historians, the scandal had arrived first. Charlotte closed the journal in front of her and exhaled slowly. The world felt smaller every day. By late afternoon she returned home through streets still damp from recent rain. The city bustled around her. Omnibuses rattled over cobblestones. Shopkeepers called to customers. Children chased one another along narrow sidewalks. Life continued. Yet Charlotte could not escape the sensation that she occupied a separate existence from everyone else. An existence defined by suspicion. When she reached the townhouse, Margaret greeted her with unusual concern. "You have a visitor." Charlotte removed her gloves. "Who?" "Miss Rebecca Weller." Charlotte immediately straightened. "Rebecca?" Margaret nodded. "She has been waiting nearly an hour." Charlotte entered the drawing room quickly. A young woman rose from the sofa the moment she appeared. Rebecca Weller could not have been older than 22. Her clothing was neat but modest. Worry had drained the color from her face. "Miss Hayes." Charlotte crossed the room immediately. "What happened?" Rebecca clasped her hands tightly. "It is Thomas." Charlotte felt her stomach tighten. Thomas Weller. The scholarship recipient whose name had become the center of recent accusations. "Is he all right?" "Yes. At least physically." Rebecca lowered her eyes. "Someone came to speak with him." Charlotte sat beside her. "Who?" "A gentleman." Rebecca hesitated. "I do not know his name." Something about her tone immediately captured Charlotte's attention. "Tell me everything." Rebecca swallowed. "He arrived 2 days ago. Well dressed. Very polite. He asked questions about the scholarship. About you." Charlotte listened carefully. "What kind of questions?" "Whether you had requested favors in exchange for helping Thomas. Whether you had influenced examination scores. Whether you had offered money before the committee reviewed applications." Charlotte remained silent. Rebecca's voice trembled slightly. "Thomas told him the truth. That you helped because he earned it." A small smile touched Charlotte's face despite everything. That sounded exactly like Thomas. Honest to a fault. "And then?" Rebecca twisted a handkerchief nervously. The gentleman seemed disappointed. Charlotte's attention sharpened. Disappointed. Not surprised. Not satisfied. Disappointed. The distinction mattered. "Did he leave a name?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. But before he left, I heard him say something." Charlotte leaned forward. "What?" "He said the story would have been simpler if Thomas had cooperated." Silence filled the room. Margaret exchanged a glance with Charlotte. Neither liked what they heard. "Are you certain?" Charlotte asked quietly. Rebecca nodded. "Very." Charlotte thanked her and promised to investigate. After Rebecca departed, Margaret closed the drawing room door. Someone is looking for evidence. Or trying to create it. Charlotte moved toward the window. Evening shadows stretched across the street outside. Gas lamps flickered to life one by one. The question is who? Margaret folded her arms. Do you have an answer? Charlotte thought immediately of Victoria Harrington. Yet suspicion alone proved nothing. Not yet. That night she slept poorly. Strange fragments of recent conversations drifted through her thoughts. Nathaniel Ashcroft asking careful questions. Committee members demanding apologies. Rebecca's story. The unknown gentleman. None of it fit together cleanly. Something remained hidden. She could feel it. The following evening brought another social obligation she would have preferred to avoid. Lady Beaumont's musical gathering had been scheduled months earlier. Cancelling now would only generate additional gossip. So Charlotte dressed with her usual care and travelled to the Beaumont residence shortly after 7 o'clock. The event attracted many of London's intellectual circles. Politicians, authors, musicians, and aristocrats mingled beneath crystal chandeliers while chamber musicians performed selections from Mendelssohn and Schubert. The atmosphere felt more civilized than most society events. Unfortunately, civilized people could still be cruel. Charlotte had been present less than 15 minutes before the whispers began. She ignored them. 20 minutes later, she noticed something else. Nathaniel Ashcroft was there. He stood near a marble fireplace speaking with an elderly parliamentarian. Their conversation appeared serious. Charlotte looked away immediately. She had no desire to repeat their previous encounters. Fate seemed to disagree. An hour later she found herself reaching for the same volume of poetry displayed in Lady Beaumont's library at the exact moment another hand reached for it as well. Charlotte froze. Nathaniel Ashcroft looked down at the book. Then at her. Miss Hayes. Your Grace. Neither moved immediately. Finally Nathaniel released the volume. Please. Charlotte accepted it. Thank you. Silence followed. Not awkward exactly. Merely unexpected. Nathaniel glanced toward the ballroom beyond the library doors. You continue to attend public events. Charlotte almost laughed. People seem fascinated by that fact. Most individuals would retreat. Most individuals have not spent months being told what they should do. His expression shifted slightly. You dislike being instructed. Only when the instructions are unreasonable. To her surprise, Nathaniel smiled. Very briefly. The transformation altered his entire face. It vanished almost immediately, but not before Charlotte noticed. Somehow that unsettled her more than his usual severity. You are remarkably stubborn. I have heard that before. Often? Frequently enough. Another silence settled between them. Yet this one felt different. Less hostile. More curious. Nathaniel studied the shelves for a moment before speaking again. The scholarship recipient. Charlotte's attention sharpened immediately. Thomas Weller. Yes. What about him? Nathaniel looked directly at her. Someone questioned his family recently. Charlotte stared. How do you know that? Because I sent inquiries after the committee meeting. Charlotte felt a complicated mixture of surprise and irritation. You investigated me. I investigated the situation. There is a difference. A significant one. Charlotte considered arguing. Instead she asked, what did you discover? Nathaniel's expression grew thoughtful. That several details do not align. Hope flickered unexpectedly inside her. Meaning. Meaning someone appears unusually determined to discredit you. For a moment neither spoke. The words hung between them. Important. Dangerous. Do you believe that? Charlotte asked quietly. Nathaniel did not answer immediately. I believe facts deserve examination before conclusions. It was not exactly an apology. Yet it felt closer than anything she had expected. Before Charlotte could respond, raised voices echoed from the ballroom. Both turned instinctively. A gentleman hurried into the library. His face appeared pale. Alarmed. Lady Beaumont requires assistance. Several nearby guests immediately gathered around him. Questions erupted from every direction. Nathaniel stepped forward. What happened? Mr. Harrison. The gentleman swallowed hard. He collapsed. Concern spread rapidly. The gathering dissolved into confusion. Guests hurried toward the ballroom. Musicians stopped playing. Conversations became anxious murmurs. Nathaniel moved immediately to help organize the situation. Charlotte watched him for a moment. Calm. Efficient. Commanding. People listened without hesitation. Within minutes, order began replacing panic. A physician was summoned. Carriages arranged. Nervous guests reassured. Charlotte found herself unexpectedly impressed. Then she noticed something else. Near the far doorway stood Victoria Harrington. Most people focused on Mr. Harrison's condition. Victoria appeared focused on something entirely different. Specifically, a footman attempting to leave unnoticed through a side corridor. Charlotte frowned. The interaction lasted only seconds. Yet she recognized tension in Victoria's posture. Fear perhaps. Or urgency. Before Charlotte could investigate further, the footman disappeared. Victoria turned and saw her watching. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Victoria smiled instantly. Polite. Elegant. Perfect. The smile never reached her eyes. Charlotte felt a chill she could not explain. Later, after Mr. Harrison recovered sufficiently to reassure everyone that no lasting harm had occurred, guests gradually resumed conversation. The evening continued, although the mood remained subdued. Charlotte departed shortly before midnight. The streets were quiet. A cold wind swept through Mayfair as her carriage rolled toward Bloomsbury. She should have been relieved. Instead, her thoughts raced. Thomas Weller. The mysterious gentleman. Nathaniel's investigation. Victoria's strange reaction. Individual pieces of a puzzle. None complete. All connected somehow. The next morning brought another surprise. A sealed envelope arrived before breakfast. Charlotte opened it cautiously. The note contained only a few lines. Miss Hayes. You asked the wrong questions. For your own sake, stop asking them. No signature accompanied the message. No identifying mark. Nothing except a faint scent of smoke lingering on the paper. Charlotte read the note twice. Then a third time. Slowly, she folded it and placed it upon the table. Someone wanted her frightened. Someone wanted her silent. The realization should have concerned her. Instead, it accomplished something entirely different. For the first time in months, she felt certain she was moving closer to the truth. And somewhere else in London, another person had reached the same conclusion. Inside Blackthorn House, Nathaniel Ashcroft stood in his study examining several documents recently delivered by a private investigator. His eyes narrowed as he read the final report. The witness he had hoped to question regarding the original accusations against Charlotte Hayes had vanished 2 days earlier without explanation. No forwarding address. No known destination. Nothing. Nathaniel set the report aside and stared into the fire. People disappeared for many reasons. Fear. Money. Opportunity. Guilt. Yet one fact troubled him above all others. According to the investigator, the missing witness had been seen meeting privately with an unidentified woman shortly before leaving London. A woman matching Victoria Harrington's description. 3 days after the anonymous warning arrived, London received a new scandal. Charlotte Hayes became its center before she even knew it existed. The first signs appeared at breakfast. Margaret entered the dining room carrying a folded newspaper with an expression that immediately made Charlotte set down her teacup. What happened? Margaret asked nothing. She simply handed over the paper. Charlotte unfolded it and scanned the page. Her pulse slowed, then stopped entirely. A short column appeared near the society section. The language remained careful, respectable, designed to appear objective. Yet every sentence carried poison. Questions had allegedly emerged regarding charitable funds. Concerns reportedly surrounded professional conduct. Several unnamed sources suggested improper relationships may have influenced scholarship decisions. No direct accusation appeared. None was necessary. Anyone reading it would understand the implication. Charlotte lowered the paper. Interesting. Margaret stared at her. Interesting? It means someone is becoming impatient. Charlotte. If they possessed actual evidence, they would publish it. Charlotte folded the newspaper neatly. Instead, they are publishing suggestions. Margaret looked unconvinced. Suggestions can ruin lives. Charlotte knew that better than most. Yet anger proved strangely absent. Whoever orchestrated this expected panic, fear, desperation. Instead, she felt something else. Certainty. The attack had arrived too quickly after the warning letter. Someone had realized she was asking questions. Someone wanted those questions to stop. By noon, the story had spread throughout Mayfair. Invitations disappeared again. Several acquaintances abruptly remembered prior engagements when Charlotte approached. A bookseller who normally greeted her warmly suddenly became fascinated by inventory records. Society had delivered its verdict before hearing a single defense. Charlotte spent the afternoon visiting a parish school in Southwark. The children knew nothing of scandals. They cared about arithmetic and stories and whether spring would arrive early this year. Their innocence offered temporary relief. Unfortunately, relief rarely lasted. As she prepared to leave, the headmaster approached her privately. His expression carried obvious discomfort. Miss Hayes. Charlotte already knew what was coming. Yes? The poor man cleared his throat. Several donors have expressed concerns. Of course they had. I understand. They are questioning future support. Charlotte smiled gently despite the disappointment settling inside her chest. You do not need to explain. I wish I did. His sincerity softened the blow. At least one person felt regret. That seemed increasingly rare. Outside, cold wind swept across the street. Charlotte climbed into her carriage and stared through the window as London passed by. Every day the walls seemed to move closer. Every day her world became slightly smaller. By evening she attended Lady Fairmont's dinner gathering. Cancelling would only feed speculation. Appearing carried its own risks. Neither choice felt appealing. The Fairmont residence overflowed with aristocrats, politicians, and wealthy merchants. Crystal glasses reflected candlelight. Silver service gleamed across long dining tables. Conversations flowed with practiced elegance. Charlotte recognized the performance immediately. Everyone behaved politely. Everyone watched her. Nathaniel Ashcroft arrived shortly before dinner. Charlotte noticed him entering the drawing room. Several young women brightened immediately. Mothers adjusted strategies. Ambitious fathers repositioned daughters. Nathaniel appeared completely unaware. Or perhaps completely uninterested. He exchanged greetings with the host and moved through the room with his usual composed confidence. Their eyes met briefly. Nothing more. Yet Charlotte sensed something different this time. Observation remained. Judgment seemed less certain. Dinner began promptly at 8. Fate, apparently determined to test Charlotte's patience, placed her only 3 seats away from Victoria Harrington. Victoria looked radiant in emerald silk. Her smile remained flawless. Her conversation charmed everyone around her. Charlotte almost admired the skill required. Almost. Miss Hayes. Victoria's voice floated across the table during the second course. I was sorry to read today's article. Several nearby conversations quieted instantly. Charlotte recognized the trap. How thoughtful of you. Victoria lowered her eyes sympathetically. Society can be terribly unfair. Charlotte lifted her wine glass. Occasionally. Although rumors rarely emerge without reason. There it was. Elegant. Subtle. Ruthless. Charlotte smiled pleasantly. Neither do rumors disappear without one. For the briefest moment Victoria's expression tightened. Then the smile returned. Quite true. Across the table, Nathaniel watched the exchange in silence. He said nothing. Yet Charlotte noticed he missed very little. The remainder of dinner passed without incident. At least until dessert. A servant entered carrying a silver tray. Upon it rested several sealed envelopes. Lady Fairmorn looked surprised. What is this? The servant bowed. Delivered moments ago, my lady. Lady Fairmorn accepted the top envelope and opened it. Her expression changed immediately. Confusion first. Then concern. Murmurs spread across the table. Another envelope passed to a guest. Then another. Within moments several people were reading identical documents. Charlotte's stomach tightened. She already knew. Somehow she knew. A folded paper appeared beside her plate. No one explained how it arrived. No one needed to. She opened it slowly. The document resembled a personal letter. At the bottom appeared her name. Her signature. Her handwriting. Except it was not. The forgery was excellent. Disturbingly excellent. According to the letter, Charlotte had privately admitted manipulating scholarship decisions in exchange for personal loyalty. The claims were absurd. Impossible. Yet many guests had already begun reading. Silence spread outward from the table like ripples across water. Charlotte looked up. Faces stared back. Shocked. Curious. Judgmental. The performance had reached a new level. Victoria placed a hand against her chest. Good heavens. Nathaniel extended his hand. May I see it? Charlotte passed him the document. His expression remained unreadable as he examined every line. Around them whispers intensified. Is it genuine? Surely not. The signature appears authentic. I always suspected something. Charlotte sat perfectly still. Panic would only help her enemies. Nathaniel continued reading. Several long moments passed. Finally he lowered the paper. Every eye in the room focused on him. Society wanted a verdict. Authority carried weight. The Duke of Blackthorn possessed more authority than most. Lady Fairmorn spoke first. Your Grace? Nathaniel looked around the table. This document proves nothing. Surprise flickered through Charlotte. So did disappointment among several guests. Lady Fairmorn frowned. But the signature can be copied. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. The accusations remain unverified. Relief touched Charlotte briefly. Then vanished. Because while Nathaniel had refused to condemn her, he had not defended her either. He remained suspended between doubt and belief. Exactly where someone like him preferred to stand. Victoria leaned forward. Surely an investigation is necessary. Perhaps. Nathaniel folded the letter carefully. That does not make it genuine. The discussion continued. Questions multiplied. Speculation flourished. By the time dinner ended, the forged letter had accomplished its purpose. Even those who doubted it now wondered. Doubt had become the weapon. Certainty was unnecessary. Charlotte departed as soon as etiquette allowed. The cold night air felt cleaner than the drawing room she left behind. Her carriage had nearly reached Bloomsbury when another thought struck her. The forgery. The handwriting. Someone had invested considerable effort creating it. Why? Why now? Why escalate from rumors to fabricated evidence? The answer arrived unexpectedly the following afternoon. Rebecca Weller appeared again. This time she looked frightened. Truly frightened. Charlotte immediately brought her inside. "Rebecca, what happened?" Rebecca clutched her gloves tightly. Someone came again. Charlotte's attention sharpened. The same man. No. Rebecca shook her head. A woman. Silence followed. Charlotte already suspected the answer. Describe her. Rebecca hesitated. Beautiful. Elegant. Dark hair. Expensive clothes. Charlotte exchanged a glance with Margaret. Rebecca continued. She wanted Thomas to sign a statement. Charlotte's pulse quickened. What statement? Rebecca reached into her reticule and removed a folded paper. This one. Charlotte opened it carefully. The document claimed Charlotte Hayes had personally arranged scholarship selections regardless of qualifications. Several blank spaces awaited signatures. Her expression hardened. Did Thomas sign? No. Relief washed through her immediately. Rebecca's next words erased it. But someone else did. The room fell silent. Who? Charlotte asked quietly. Rebecca lowered her eyes. A former committee clerk. The name meant little to Charlotte initially. Then memory returned. The clerk had resigned months earlier. Financial troubles. Debts. Frequent complaints about money. Vulnerable. Easy to influence. Easy to purchase. Did Thomas recognize the woman? Rebecca nodded. He overheard her name. Charlotte waited. Rebecca swallowed. Lady Harrington. For several seconds no one spoke. The pieces began sliding together. Rumors. Anonymous letters. Missing witnesses. Forged documents. Purchase statements. The pattern finally emerged. Yet proof remained elusive. Suspicion alone could not save her. Across London, another conversation unfolded inside Blackthorn House. Nathaniel stood before the fireplace while his investigator delivered new information. The missing witness has been located. Nathaniel's attention sharpened instantly. Where? Manchester. Did you speak with him? Briefly. The investigator hesitated. He admitted receiving payment before leaving London. Nathaniel's expression darkened. From whom? The investigator removed a folded note. We recovered this from his lodging. Nathaniel accepted the paper. His eyes narrowed immediately. It contained only a few lines. Most had been burned away. Deliberately destroyed. Yet one surviving fragment remained visible near the bottom. A single signature. Victoria Harrington. Silence filled the study. Nathaniel stared at the charred paper for several long moments. Then he looked toward the fire. The evidence was still incomplete. The puzzle remained unfinished. Yet one fact had become impossible to ignore. Someone had spent months constructing a scandal around Charlotte Hayes. Someone had carefully arranged every accusation. Every rumor. Every witness. Every lie. And for the first time since this began, Nathaniel found himself asking not whether Charlotte was guilty, but how much she had already lost because no one had bothered to question the story. The invitation arrived on cream-colored stationery edged with gold. Charlotte recognized the seal immediately. The Winter Conservatory Gala. Hosted by the Duchess of Pembroke. Attended by nearly every influential family in London. Under normal circumstances it would have been one of the season's most anticipated events. Under current circumstances it felt more like a public trial. Margaret read the invitation twice before setting it aside. You do not have to go. Charlotte stood near the drawing-room window, watching rain slide down the glass. If I stay home, people will say I am hiding. And if you attend, they will say something else. Margaret sighed softly. Then perhaps it no longer matters what they say. Charlotte wished that were true. Unfortunately, reputation rarely disappeared quietly. Left unanswered, rumors hardened into accepted fact. I am going. Margaret studied her niece for a moment. Then she nodded. Very well. The gala took place 3 nights later beneath the enormous glass roof of Pembroke Conservatory. Hundreds of lanterns illuminated exotic plants imported from across the empire. Palm trees rose toward the ceiling. Orchids bloomed among marble pathways. A fountain sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers suspended from iron arches overhead. The setting seemed almost magical. The atmosphere was not. Charlotte felt the shift the moment she entered. Conversations faltered. Eyes followed her. Familiar expressions appeared across the room. Curiosity. Judgment. Anticipation. They were waiting for something. She simply did not know what. Lady Fairmorn offered a polite greeting before quickly finding another conversation. 2 women Charlotte had known for years suddenly became fascinated by a nearby floral arrangement. A gentleman who once requested 3 dances during a single evening pretended not to recognize her at all. The isolation no longer surprised her. That was perhaps the saddest part. Across the conservatory, Victoria Harrington stood surrounded by admirers. Emerald silk had been replaced by deep sapphire this evening. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Laughter followed wherever she moved. Charlotte watched her briefly, then looked away. Victoria's confidence had grown noticeably during recent weeks, as though she believed victory was approaching. An uncomfortable thought settled into Charlotte's mind. What if it was? Suspicion was not proof. Truth was not evidence. She possessed neither. Music drifted through the conservatory. Couples filled the dance floor. The evening progressed with exhausting predictability until Lord Pembroke requested attention. The elderly aristocrat climbed onto a small platform near the orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice carried easily through the room. Conversations quieted. Before the next waltz begins, there is a matter requiring clarification. Charlotte felt her stomach tighten immediately. Around her, anticipation sharpened. People turned. Waiting. Watching. Lord Pembroke continued. Questions have troubled our society for months. Questions regarding integrity, trust, responsibility. A murmur moved through the crowd. Charlotte already understood. This was no coincidence. Certain accusations have damaged respected institutions. Lord Pembroke looked directly toward her. And perhaps it is time for answers. Silence spread through the conservatory. Hundreds of eyes settled upon Charlotte Hayes. Somewhere nearby, someone inhaled sharply. Someone else whispered her name. Lord Pembroke descended from the platform and approached. Miss Hayes. His tone carried false gentleness. Would you care to address the concerns surrounding your conduct? Charlotte stood perfectly still. The room seemed smaller suddenly. Warmer. More dangerous. This is neither the time nor place. On the contrary. Lord Pembroke smiled. It seems the perfect place. Several guests nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. Very few appeared surprised. This had been planned. Charlotte glanced toward Victoria. The younger woman's expression radiated sympathy. Yet satisfaction gleamed behind her eyes. The realization settled like ice. Victoria had arranged this. Of course she had. Public humiliation always worked best before an audience. Miss Hayes. Lord Pembroke pressed. Surely you wish to defend yourself. Charlotte looked around the conservatory. Not a single person stepped forward. Not one. Months earlier she might have felt anger. Tonight she felt only exhaustion. Then movement near the rear entrance captured her attention. Nathaniel Ashcroft had arrived. The timing seemed almost absurd. The crowd noticed him immediately. Conversations shifted. Attention divided. Yet Lord Pembroke continued. "Unless silence is your answer." Charlotte drew a slow breath. "My answer remains unchanged." "And what answer is that?" "The truth." Lord Pembroke's smile thinned. "How convenient." Laughter rippled through part of the crowd. Not loud. Worse. Polite. Controlled. The kind of laughter that informed a person they no longer belonged. Charlotte felt heat rise beneath her skin. Not shame. Something closer to disappointment. These people had known her for years. Many had attended charitable events beside her. Shared dinners. Shared conversations. Shared causes. Yet a handful of rumors had erased everything. Lord Pembroke spread his hands dramatically. Then perhaps a simple acknowledgement would help restore confidence. There it was again. The same request disguised beneath different language. Admit enough to satisfy society. Accept blame regardless of truth. Allow everyone an easy conclusion. Charlotte looked directly at him. "No." Murmurs followed. Lord Pembroke's expression hardened. "You continue to place pride above wisdom." "No." Charlotte's voice remained calm. "I place truth above convenience." More whispers. More judgment. Across the room Nathaniel had stopped moving. His attention fixed entirely upon the scene unfolding before him. Victoria stepped forward gracefully. "Perhaps Miss Hayes is overwhelmed." Her voice carried perfectly. "We must show compassion." Charlotte almost laughed. Compassion. From Victoria Harrington. The performance deserved applause. "How kind of you," Charlotte replied. Victoria lowered her gaze modestly. "I only wish for peace." "Of course you do." Something in Charlotte's tone caused several nearby guests to glance between them. For a fraction of a second uncertainty appeared. Then vanished. Victoria recovered instantly. Lord Pembroke seized control again. "Miss Hayes." His voice sharpened. "You stand before friends willing to forgive mistakes." "Friends." Charlotte nearly smiled. The word sounded ridiculous. "Then they are remarkably generous. All they ask is honesty." Charlotte felt every eye upon her. The conservatory had become a courtroom. The audience had already reached a verdict. They merely wanted confirmation. Nathaniel remained silent. Watching. Evaluating. Waiting. For reasons she could not explain, that bothered her most of all. He knew enough now to doubt the accusations. Yet he still stood apart. Still observed instead of acting. Still allowed the spectacle to continue. Lord Pembroke stepped closer. "Why make this difficult?" Charlotte looked at him. Then at the crowd. Then finally at Nathaniel Ashcroft. Grey eyes met hers across the conservatory. Unreadable as ever. "Because it is difficult," she said softly. The room quieted further. "Because truth often is." Lord Pembroke shook his head. "Pride will destroy you." Charlotte's patience finally reached its limit. Months of rumors. Months of whispers. Months of people demanding surrender while calling it grace. Something inside her simply stopped yielding. Lord Pembroke raised his voice. "Then cry if you must. Admit the mistake. Accept forgiveness. End this nonsense." The words echoed beneath the glass ceiling. Silence followed. Absolute silence. Every guest waited. Some expected tears. Others expected retreat. Charlotte felt the weight of hundreds of expectations pressing against her. Then she smiled. Not bitterly. Not cruelly. Simply smiled. She looked past Lord Pembroke. Past the crowd. directly at Nathaniel Ashcroft. The Duke who had questioned her, judged her, watched her suffer while deciding what to believe. Her voice carried clearly through the conservatory. "You first, Your Grace." For one breathtaking second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The fountain continued splashing softly somewhere nearby. Music had stopped entirely. Even the air seemed frozen. Shock spread across the room. Genuine shock. Charlotte had not addressed Lord Pembroke. She had challenged the most powerful man present. Nathaniel's expression changed. Not dramatically. Yet something cracked beneath the surface. The crowd sensed it immediately. Charlotte continued before anyone recovered. "You asked me to accept blame I did not earn." Her gaze never left Nathaniel's. "You asked me to apologize because it would make everyone more comfortable." No one interrupted. No one dared. "You asked me to carry the burden of lies simply because the truth requires effort." The silence deepened. Charlotte's voice softened. "If surrender is so noble, Your Grace, perhaps you should begin." A collective breath swept through the conservatory. Lord Pembroke looked horrified. Several ladies appeared close to fainting. Victoria stood motionless. For the first time since this began, genuine uncertainty flashed across her face. Nathaniel did not speak immediately. Charlotte almost expected anger, condemnation, authority. Instead, he simply looked at her. Really looked at her. As though seeing her clearly for the first time. The crowd waited for him to crush the challenge. He did not. The seconds stretched. Then Nathaniel turned slowly toward Lord Pembroke. "Enough." The single word carried across the room like a command. Lord Pembroke blinked. "Your Grace?" Nathaniel's gaze remained cold. "This ends now." Confusion spread immediately. Victoria stepped forward. Surely no one intended harm. Nathaniel looked at her. Whatever she saw in his expression caused her smile to falter. Only slightly. "Still enough. Miss Hayes will not be questioned further this evening." His voice remained calm. Final. Absolute. Nobody argued. Nobody challenged him. Power worked differently when attached to certainty. Charlotte felt surprise ripple through her. This was not a defense. Not exactly. Yet it was the first time Nathaniel had publicly stopped the humiliation. The first time he had chosen action over observation. Lord Pembroke attempted a nervous laugh. "Of course. Naturally." Nathaniel ignored him completely. The orchestra resumed playing moments later. Conversations returned. Yet nothing felt the same. The evening had shifted. Something fundamental had changed. Charlotte knew it. The crowd knew it. Most importantly, Nathaniel knew it. As guests slowly dispersed across the conservatory, Charlotte turned toward the nearest exit. She had no desire to remain. "Miss Hayes." Nathaniel's voice stopped her. She looked back. He approached alone. No audience now. No spectacle. Only the two of them. For a moment neither spoke. Then Nathaniel said quietly, "That was unwise." Charlotte's tired smile returned. "Perhaps. You challenged me before half of London." Only half. To her surprise, another faint smile touched his face. Gone almost instantly. "You are impossible." "I have heard that frequently." Silence settled between them. Different this time. Less hostile. More honest. Nathaniel studied her carefully. Then his attention drifted briefly toward her left wrist where her glove had shifted again during the confrontation. Just enough to reveal the faint edge of an old mark beneath the fabric. Something dark crossed his expression. Concern, perhaps. Guilt. Charlotte could not tell. Before she could ask, a servant hurried toward them carrying a sealed envelope. "Your Grace." Nathaniel accepted it. His eyes narrowed as he read the contents. The change happened instantly. Whatever message appeared inside erased every trace of amusement. Charlotte noticed. So did the servant. Nathaniel folded the note slowly. What happened? Charlotte asked before thinking better of it. For a moment he seemed reluctant to answer. Then he said, "The clerk who signed the statement against you." Charlotte's pulse quickened. What about him? Nathaniel met her gaze. Someone burned his records before my investigators could reach them. The noise of the gala faded around them. Charlotte felt a chill despite the warm conservatory air. Another piece of evidence gone. Another trail erased. Somewhere in the crowd, someone remained several steps ahead. And for the first time, Nathaniel Ashcroft no longer looked like a man observing a scandal. He looked like a man realizing how carefully it had been built. Nathaniel Ashcroft did not sleep that night. Long after the Winter Conservatory Gala ended and London settled into silence, he remained alone in his study at Blackthorn House. The fire burned low. Candlelight flickered across ledgers, reports, and correspondence scattered over his desk. None of it held his attention. Instead, his thoughts returned repeatedly to a single moment. Charlotte Hayes standing beneath hundreds of lanterns. Refusing to surrender. Refusing to apologize. Refusing to break. Most people, when cornered by society, sought escape. Some pleaded. Others compromised. Charlotte had done neither. She had challenged him. Publicly. Fearlessly. The memory should have irritated him. Instead it unsettled him for entirely different reasons. He rose and crossed to the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere beyond the darkness lay a city filled with people eager to judge a woman they barely knew. The realization left an unpleasant taste in his mouth. For months he had told himself he was remaining objective. Careful. Rational. Yet objectivity had become a convenient excuse for inaction. While he evaluated evidence, Charlotte had stood alone. While he examined possibilities, her reputation had been dismantled piece by piece. Nathaniel stared into the darkness. The truth was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Someone had built this scandal deliberately. Someone intelligent. Patient. Ruthless. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. His valet stepped inside. Forgive the interruption, Your Grace. A messenger has arrived. Nathaniel frowned. It was nearly midnight. Who sent him? He would not say. Nathaniel accepted the envelope. The seal had already been broken during inspection. Inside lay a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No signature. Only a brief message. The school in Southwark has lost 3 donors. More will follow. Ask yourself who benefits. Nathaniel read the note twice. Then set it down carefully. The school. Charlotte's school. Another piece moved into place. Whoever orchestrated the attacks was no longer targeting only Charlotte. They were targeting everything associated with her. Every institution. Every connection. Every source of support. Find Mr. Hargrave first thing tomorrow morning. His valet nodded. The investigator, Your Grace. Immediately. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Nathaniel sat across from Jonathan Hargrave, the former military intelligence officer who handled his most sensitive investigations. Hargrave possessed an exceptional memory and an unfortunate habit of noticing things other people preferred hidden. Nathaniel appreciated both qualities. Update me. Hargrave opened a leather folder. The forged letters originated from a printing workshop in Whitechapel. Nathaniel listened carefully. The owner claims he received payment through an intermediary. Can the intermediary be identified? Possibly. Hargrave paused. However, another development concerns me more. Nathaniel waited. Hargrave removed a second document. Several debts connected to the Hayes household disappeared during the past month. Nathaniel's attention sharpened. Disappeared? Paid anonymously. Silence followed. Nathaniel examined the report. Charlotte had never mentioned financial difficulties. Then again, she rarely mentioned personal matters at all. How significant? Significant enough to prevent legal action. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. Another problem. Another burden she had apparently faced without complaint. Who made the payments? Hargrave shook his head. Unknown. Nathaniel looked again at the figures. The amount was substantial. Too substantial for coincidence. Someone was helping Charlotte. Secretly. The question was why. Across London, Charlotte faced problems of her own. 2 committee members resigned from the educational fund before luncheon. Another donor withdrew support. By afternoon, rumors suggested the organization itself might dissolve. Charlotte listened as Mrs. Winfield delivered the news with obvious embarrassment. "I am sorry." The older woman twisted her gloves nervously. "People are frightened." Charlotte offered a tired smile. "That appears to be a recurring theme." Mrs. Winfield hesitated. "For what it is worth, I never believed the accusations." Charlotte blinked. The admission surprised her. "Thank you. I should have said so sooner." For a brief moment neither spoke. Then Mrs. Winfield sighed. "Cowardice becomes easier when everyone around you is afraid." Charlotte watched her leave and found herself unexpectedly moved. One honest sentence. One simple acknowledgement. Somehow it mattered. More than she would have expected. That evening brought another surprise. A solicitor arrived at the Hayes residence shortly after dinner. Margaret received him in the drawing room. Charlotte joined them moments later. The gentleman rose immediately. "Miss Hayes. How may I help you?" The solicitor adjusted his spectacles. "I represent an anonymous benefactor." Charlotte exchanged a glance with Margaret. Neither liked the sound of that. "Continue." The solicitor produced several documents. "Outstanding obligations associated with this property have been satisfied." Silence filled the room. Charlotte stared. "What obligations?" "Mortgage payments. Tax arrears. Maintenance debts." Her pulse slowed. Then stopped entirely. Margaret looked equally stunned. "There must be some mistake." The solicitor shook his head. "There is no mistake." Charlotte accepted the papers and reviewed them carefully. The figures were accurate. Painfully accurate. Debt she had spent years quietly managing had vanished. Paid in full. Who provided the funds? The solicitor smiled apologetically. "I am not authorized to disclose that information." "Then kindly inform your client that I cannot accept anonymous charity. The payments have already been completed." Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. "Wonderful. Just wonderful." The solicitor departed shortly afterward. Margaret remained silent until the front door closed. Who would do this? Charlotte stared at the documents spread across the table. "I have no idea." Yet even as she spoke, one uncomfortable possibility entered her mind. Nathaniel Ashcroft. She dismissed it immediately. The notion seemed absurd. He barely trusted her. Why would he secretly pay her debts? No. The explanation had to be something else. Unfortunately, no better explanation appeared. The following afternoon Charlotte visited the Southwark School again. The atmosphere felt noticeably different. Brighter. More hopeful. Children laughed in the courtyard. Teachers smiled. The tension that had hovered over the building for weeks seemed diminished. The headmaster greeted her enthusiastically. Excellent news. Charlotte frowned. What happened? A new donor appeared. She blinked. A donor? Anonymous. Of course. The headmaster beamed. Enough funding for another year. Charlotte felt a strange sensation settle over her. Relief mixed with confusion. Anonymous assistance. Again. Did the donor leave a name? No. The headmaster lowered his voice. Only instructions. Charlotte waited. The school is to continue operating exactly as before. She stared at him. That was all. Precisely. As she left the building later that afternoon, unease followed her. Someone was intervening. Quietly. Systematically. Protecting institutions connected to her. Eliminating threats. Paying debts. Why? And why remain hidden? Meanwhile, at Blackthorn House, Nathaniel reviewed another report from Hargrave. This one concerned Victoria Harrington. The investigator stood beside the desk. Her movements matched the timeline repeatedly. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Explain. Hargrave opened the file. Every major accusation against Miss Hayes coincides with private meetings involving Lady Harrington or her associates. Nathaniel read silently. Charitable committee members. Former clerks. Witnesses. Printers. The pattern grew increasingly difficult to dismiss. Still no direct proof. Hargrave nodded reluctantly. Not yet. Nathaniel set the report aside. Frustration simmered beneath his usual composure. Evidence existed. Pieces existed. Yet the final connection remained missing. Without it, accusations would accomplish nothing. A footman entered carrying fresh correspondence. Nathaniel accepted the stack absent-mindedly. Most letters involved estate matters. Parliamentary issues. Routine obligations. Then one envelope caught his attention. No sender. No seal. Inside lay a single folded page. Nathaniel unfolded it slowly. His expression changed immediately. Hargrave noticed. What is it? Nathaniel handed him the note. Hargrave read silently. Then frowned. The message contained only one sentence. If you wish to understand Charlotte Hayes, ask why she always hides her left wrist. Silence settled across the study. Nathaniel looked toward the fire. The anonymous message should have felt manipulative. Suspicious. Instead it awakened a memory. The faint mark he had glimpsed more than once. The way Charlotte adjusted her gloves whenever attention drifted there. The subtle discomfort crossing her expression. Questions multiplied immediately. Hargrave folded the note. Do you think it means anything? Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed on the flames. I think someone wants me looking in a particular direction. Then perhaps we should ignore it. Nathaniel considered that. Then slowly shook his head. Because despite every warning, despite every deception surrounding this case, one fact remained impossible to dismiss. Every time he thought he understood Charlotte Hayes, another layer emerged beneath the surface. And for reasons he could no longer explain, he wanted answers. Not because of the scandal. Not because of duty. Not even because of justice. Something more personal had begun taking root. Something far more dangerous. Outside, evening settled across London. Gas lamps illuminated wet streets. Carriages rolled through gathering fog. Somewhere in the city, Charlotte sat alone beside her drawing-room window, studying documents proving her family's future had been saved by an unknown hand. And across London, Nathaniel Ashcroft stood before his study fire, staring at a single sentence that refused to leave his mind. For the first time since their paths crossed, both were moving toward the same truth. Neither realized how close they had become to finding it. The answer arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a forgotten ledger. Nathaniel Ashcroft had not expected it. In truth, he had nearly abandoned the search entirely. After weeks of chasing rumors, missing witnesses, forged letters, and disappearing records, every path seemed designed to lead nowhere. Yet sometimes the smallest details survived when larger evidence vanished. Jonathan Hargrave entered Blackthorn House shortly after 10 o'clock carrying a worn leather folder tucked beneath his arm. His expression immediately caught Nathaniel's attention. "You found something." Hargrave placed the folder on the desk. "Perhaps." Nathaniel opened it. Inside rested copies of medical accounts dating back almost 15 years. Most appeared ordinary. Household expenses. Physician visits. Apothecary records. Then one name caught his eye. Hayes. His attention sharpened instantly. Where did these come from? An estate archive in Surrey. Hargrave pulled up a chair. The records belonged to Dr. Samuel Whitaker. He passed away 3 years ago. His nephew recently inherited the practice and began organizing old files. Nathaniel continued reading. Several entries referenced the Hayes family. The dates stretched across multiple years. Most involved routine illnesses. Then he found a series of notes appearing repeatedly beside Charlotte's name. Follow-up examination. Repeat treatment. Continued monitoring recommended. Nathaniel frowned. What condition? Hargrave hesitated. That is where things become interesting. Nathaniel looked up. Explain. Hargrave folded his hands. The records indicate recurring injuries. Silence filled the study. Nathaniel lowered his gaze back to the documents. The handwriting was difficult to decipher. Yet the pattern remained obvious. Multiple visits. Consistent concern. Repeated observations. None explained clearly. All suggested something ongoing. Something hidden. How old was she? Nathaniel asked quietly. The first notation appears when she was 13. Nathaniel stared at the page. 13. The image unsettled him more than he cared to admit. And the family? Hargrave's expression darkened. Financial records suggest increasing difficulties after her father's death. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. Charlotte had rarely spoken about her past. In fact, she almost never spoke about herself at all. Every conversation remained focused on others. Schools. Committees. Charitable work. Never her own life. Now he found himself wondering why. Hargrave opened another folder. There is more. Nathaniel waited. The physician made private observations. He passed over a folded page. Nathaniel unfolded it carefully. The note had clearly never been intended for public viewing. Patient displays unusual reluctance to discuss source of injuries. Protective toward younger family members. Consistently minimizes personal discomfort. Appears more concerned for others than herself. Recommend continued observation. Nathaniel read the passage twice. Then a third time. Something tightened inside his chest. Not because of what the physician described. Because it sounded exactly like the woman he had come to know. Even after 15 years, the same patterns remained. The same silence. The same instinct to shield others. The same refusal to seek sympathy. Hargrave studied him carefully. Do you think it connects to the mark? Nathaniel looked toward the fire. The faint glimpse beneath her glove returned immediately to memory. I do not know. Yet he suspected otherwise. Across London, Charlotte spent the afternoon organizing books recently donated to the Southwark School. The task was simple. Repetitive. Comforting. For several hours she almost forgot the growing storm surrounding her life. Children wandered between shelves carrying stories about explorers, kings, inventors, and distant lands. Their excitement made her smile despite everything. Miss Hayes. Charlotte turned. Thomas Weller approached carrying a stack of textbooks. At 19, he possessed the earnest determination that had earned his scholarship in the first place. Good afternoon, Thomas. He set the books aside. There is something I should tell you. Her attention sharpened immediately. "What is it?" Thomas hesitated. I remembered something about the woman. Charlotte already knew who he meant. Lady Harrington. He nodded. The day she visited. Charlotte closed the ledger she had been reviewing. "Go on." Thomas frowned thoughtfully. She seemed angry. "Because you refused to sign?" "No." His answer surprised her. "Before that." Charlotte waited. "She asked whether anyone else had helped my family." A strange chill moved through her. What exactly did she ask? Thomas repeated the conversation as accurately as possible. Charlotte listened carefully. The details seemed insignificant at first. Then one phrase stood out. "Did Miss Hayes ever mention the doctor?" Charlotte felt her pulse slow. "The doctor?" Thomas nodded. "That is what Lady Harrington asked." For several seconds Charlotte said nothing. Memories stirred unexpectedly. Old memories. Unwelcome memories. Thomas noticed her reaction immediately. "Miss Hayes." She forced a smile. "It is nothing." Yet it was not nothing. Not even close. That evening, after returning home, Charlotte found herself standing before the mirror in her bedchamber. The house had grown quiet. Margaret had already retired. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Slowly, Charlotte removed her gloves. Her gaze settled upon her left wrist. The faint mark remained visible beneath candlelight. Age had softened it. Time had faded it. Yet it remained. A reminder she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. She touched it lightly. Then immediately lowered her hand. Some memories belonged in the past. They served no purpose in the present. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Charlotte?" Margaret's voice came through the door. "May I come in?" "Of course." Margaret entered carrying a small wooden box. Her expression appeared unusually serious. Charlotte recognized the box immediately. She had not seen it in years. "Where did you find that?" Margaret placed it gently upon the dressing table. "The attic." Charlotte stared. Silence stretched between them. "I thought it was lost." "Apparently not." Margaret hesitated. "I believe it belongs to you." Charlotte looked at the box without touching it. Dust still clung to the edges. Time had darkened the wood. Yet the sight alone reopened memories she had spent years burying. "I do not need it." Margaret moved closer. "Perhaps not. But someone may." Charlotte met her gaze. "What does that mean?" Margaret sighed softly. "You cannot spend your entire life protecting people who never protected you." The words landed harder than expected. Charlotte looked away. "That is not what I am doing." "Is it not?" Silence answered for her. Margaret touched her shoulder gently. The past already happened. Charlotte swallowed. "Yes. Pretending otherwise does not change it." After Margaret left, Charlotte remained alone with the box. For nearly an hour she ignored it. Then finally she reached forward and lifted the lid. Inside rested old letters. Medical receipts. Family papers. And one folded document she recognized instantly. Her breath caught. Not because she had forgotten it. Because she remembered it too well. Across the city, Nathaniel received another visitor. Dr. Edward Chambers arrived shortly before dusk. One of London's most respected physicians, Chambers had inherited several records from retired colleagues over the years. Nathaniel rarely involved doctors in investigations. This situation had become an exception. "Thank you for coming." Chambers accepted a chair. Hargrave explained the circumstances. Nathaniel passed over copies of the old notes. "Can you interpret these?" The physician adjusted his spectacles and began reading. Several minutes passed. Nathaniel remained silent. Finally Chambers lowered the pages. His expression had changed. "These are unusual." "How?" Chambers tapped one notation. "The doctor repeatedly references protective behavior." Nathaniel frowned. Meaning the patient consistently redirected concern away from herself. Chambers looked up. "That is not common in children." Nathaniel absorbed that quietly. Chambers continued. "The physician also notes recurring concealment. Concealment. Attempts to hide symptoms. Explanations that do not align with observations." Silence followed. Nathaniel looked toward the window. Rain blurred the city beyond. Would that behavior continue into adulthood? Chambers considered carefully. Often. The answer settled heavily in the room. Because suddenly several things made sense. Charlotte's reluctance to discuss herself. Her instinct to minimize problems. Her refusal to seek help. Even the anonymous payments. If someone assisted her, she would likely resent it. Not because she was proud. Because she had spent years believing her burdens belonged to her alone. Nathaniel dismissed the physician shortly afterward. Yet sleep remained impossible. Long after midnight he sat alone reviewing every interaction he had shared with Charlotte Hayes. The challenge at the conservatory. The scholarship meeting. The quiet strength beneath every accusation. Gradually a realization emerged. He had been asking the wrong question from the beginning. The issue was never whether Charlotte committed the acts described by society. The real question was why someone had chosen her. Why target her specifically? Why invest months destroying one woman? His gaze drifted toward the final physician's note resting atop the desk. Protective toward younger family members. Consistently minimizes personal discomfort. Then another memory surfaced. Thomas Weller's family. The school. The committees. Every vulnerable person she encountered. Charlotte always stepped between trouble and someone weaker. Always. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the answer felt dangerously close. Somewhere in her past lay the missing piece. Somewhere behind the mark she hid beneath a glove. Somewhere inside the box she had not opened for years. And for the first time since this investigation began, he was no longer searching for evidence against Charlotte Hayes. He was searching for the truth about what had happened to her. Charlotte did not sleep that night either. The wooden box remained open on her dressing table long after the candles burned low. Papers lay scattered around her like fragments of a life she had spent years trying to forget. Receipts. Letters. Medical notes. Small pieces of evidence that once seemed important and now felt impossibly distant. Yet one document remained in her hands. The same document she had recognized immediately. The same document she had hoped never to see again. It was not a letter. It was a statement. Signed 15 years earlier by Dr. Samuel Whitaker. A private record documenting observations regarding Charlotte's repeated injuries and the circumstances surrounding them. At 13 years old, Charlotte had believed the physician could save everyone. Children often believed impossible things. The memory arrived slowly. Painfully. She closed her eyes. Her father had died when she was 12. The loss devastated the family. Financial troubles followed almost immediately. Debts appeared. Investments failed. Creditors arrived. Her mother remarried less than a year later. At first everyone praised the decision. Mr. Richard Holloway seemed respectable. Educated. Charming. Financially secure. Society approved. Society often approved the wrong people. Charlotte remembered the early months clearly. Holloway always smiled in public. Always spoke politely. Always appeared generous. Yet behind closed doors he demanded obedience. Absolute obedience. Not only from Charlotte. From everyone. Especially her younger sister Emily. The thought of Emily still tightened something inside her chest. Emily had been only 8 years old. Gentle. Trusting. Far too young to understand why certain adults inspired fear. Charlotte opened her eyes and stared at the physician's statement. The paper trembled slightly between her fingers. She had spent years convincing herself those memories no longer mattered. Yet time had not erased them. It had merely hidden them beneath layers of responsibility. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Margaret entered cautiously. One glance at Charlotte's face told her everything. "You opened it." Charlotte nodded. Margaret moved closer. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally Charlotte handed over the document. Margaret read silently. Her expression softened. Then saddened. "I remember this." "I know." Charlotte looked toward the window. Dawn had begun coloring the horizon pale gray. Dr. Whittaker wanted to report everything. Margaret folded the paper carefully. "Yes." Mother refused. The older woman closed her eyes briefly. She was frightened. Charlotte laughed softly. There was no humor in the sound. Everyone was frightened. Another silence followed. Then Margaret sat beside her. Emily never knew. Charlotte swallowed hard. That was the point. Protect her. The words echoed through memory. Protect her no matter what. Charlotte had built her life around those instructions. She had accepted blame. Stayed silent. Covered truths. Endured consequences. All because Emily deserved a childhood untouched by fear. It had seemed worth it at the time. Perhaps it still was. "Where is Emily now?" Margaret asked gently. Charlotte smiled despite herself. "Happy." The answer came immediately. "Married. Safe. Loved." Margaret nodded. "Because of you." Charlotte looked away. "Not because of me." "Charlotte." The older woman's voice softened. "You gave up more than anyone knows." Charlotte stood abruptly and crossed the room. She could not bear sympathy. Not this morning. Not attached to those memories. It does not matter anymore. Margaret did not argue. Yet her silence suggested she disagreed. Across London, Nathaniel Ashcroft spent the morning reviewing additional reports. Hargrave had assembled everything connected to Charlotte's past. School records. Estate records. Family histories. Most appeared ordinary. Then one detail emerged repeatedly. Emily Hayes. Nathaniel read through several documents twice before finally looking up. The younger sister. Hargrave nodded. Married 3 years ago. Current residence. Yorkshire. Nathaniel stared thoughtfully at the page. Emily appeared frequently throughout old records. Medical visits. Educational expenses. Family correspondence. Nearly every difficult decision Charlotte made somehow connected back to her younger sister. Interesting. Hargrave folded his arms. You noticed it too. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Everything seems to revolve around protecting her. Exactly. Hargrave placed another file on the desk. There is more. Nathaniel opened it. Inside rested copies of old legal documents. One in particular immediately caught his attention. Estate guardianship arrangements following Mr. Hayes's death. He read carefully. Then again. His expression darkened. Richard Holloway had gained extraordinary control over family finances. Much more than Nathaniel expected. This cannot be correct. Hargrave grimaced. Unfortunately it is. Nathaniel continued reading. Charlotte had possessed almost no legal authority despite being the eldest child. Every significant decision required Holloway's approval. Every financial matter. Every property matter. Every educational matter. Complete dependence. Complete vulnerability. The realization left him deeply uncomfortable. Suddenly many things made sense. Too many. That afternoon Charlotte attended a small fundraising luncheon. The event itself proved uneventful. Few guests spoke to her. Fewer still offered support. She had grown accustomed to both. As the luncheon ended, Lady Agnes Pembroke approached hesitantly. Charlotte immediately prepared herself for another unpleasant conversation. Instead, Lady Agnes surprised her. "Miss Hayes." Charlotte inclined her head politely. "Lady Agnes." The older woman hesitated. "I owe you an apology." Charlotte blinked. Genuine apologies had become exceedingly rare. For what? Lady Agnes looked uncomfortable. "I should have questioned certain accusations more carefully." Charlotte studied her face. The regret appeared sincere. "What changed?" Lady Agnes glanced around before lowering her voice. "Questions are being asked now." Charlotte felt her attention sharpen. "Questions?" "About the accusations themselves." Hope flickered briefly. Dangerous hope. The kind that invited disappointment. "I see." Lady Agnes sighed. "Perhaps I allowed myself to believe what was convenient." Charlotte remembered the committee meeting. The scholarship controversy. The pressure to apologize. Part of her wanted to hold resentment. Surprisingly, she found none. Only fatigue. "You were not alone." Lady Agnes looked relieved. Then embarrassed. "That does not excuse it." Before leaving, the older woman paused. "There is one more thing." Charlotte waited. "Victoria Harrington appears unusually nervous lately." The comment seemed casual. Yet something about it lingered after Lady Agnes departed. Nervous. Interesting. Very interesting. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington sat inside her family's drawing room staring at a letter she had read 4 times already. Her confidence had begun to crack. Small signs appeared first. A witness refusing cooperation. Questions emerging unexpectedly. Nathaniel Ashcroft paying attention to details he should have ignored. Most troubling of all, Charlotte Hayes refused to break. Victoria folded the letter sharply. This was not how the story was supposed to end. A servant entered. "Your ladyship? Mr. Simmons has arrived." Victoria immediately straightened. "Send him in." The visitor entered moments later. Middle-aged. Nervous. Clearly uncomfortable. Victoria did not waste time. "Has the problem been resolved?" The man hesitated. "Not entirely." Her expression hardened. "Explain." "Certain records still exist." Silence filled the room. "I thought those records were destroyed." "Most were." Victoria closed her eyes briefly. "Most. Not all." "Where?" The man swallowed. "Unknown." Victoria rose and crossed toward the fireplace. Her heartbeat quickened despite years of practice hiding emotion. Unknown records represented danger. Especially now. Especially with Nathaniel becoming involved. "Find them." Her voice remained calm. "Immediately." After the man departed, Victoria stood alone beside the fire. For the first time in months, uncertainty had begun replacing confidence. Across the city, Nathaniel received an unexpected visitor of his own. Emily Whittaker arrived shortly before evening. Charlotte's younger sister. Hargrave had arranged the meeting quietly. Nathaniel studied the woman as she entered the study. She appeared kind. Intelligent. Entirely unaware of her significance. "Thank you for seeing me." Nathaniel gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." Emily complied. A brief conversation followed. Polite at first. Then gradually more personal. Nathaniel asked careful questions. About childhood. About family. About Charlotte. Emily answered willingly. Affection colored every response involving her sister. Charlotte practically raised me. Nathaniel listened carefully. After your father's death? Emily nodded. She sacrificed everything. Something in her voice carried quiet certainty. Not admiration. Knowledge. The difference mattered. What do you mean? Emily smiled sadly. You would have to ask her. Nathaniel considered that. Perhaps I will. Emily's expression softened further. She will not tell you. The answer arrived immediately. Without hesitation. Nathaniel frowned. Why? Emily looked toward the window. The evening sun cast golden light across the room. For a moment she appeared far younger than her years. Because Charlotte has spent her entire life protecting other people from painful truths. Silence settled between them. Then Emily added something unexpected. Including me. Nathaniel felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. Emily stood shortly afterward and prepared to leave. At the doorway she paused. There is one thing you should know. Nathaniel waited. Whatever people say about my sister. Her voice remained steady. Certain. They are wrong. Then she departed. Alone once more, Nathaniel remained motionless for several minutes. The physician's notes. The family records. Emily's words. Every piece pointed toward the same conclusion. Charlotte Hayes had been carrying something for years. Something large enough to shape her entire life. Something painful enough that she still refused to discuss it. Outside, darkness settled across London. Gas lamps flickered awake. Carriages rolled through mist-covered streets. And in a quiet townhouse in Bloomsbury, Charlotte sat beside her bedroom window holding a single faded photograph. One side showed her younger self standing beside Emily. Smiling despite everything. On the back, written in her own handwriting from years ago, appeared four simple words. Keep Emily safe always. Charlotte closed her eyes. She had made that promise long ago. She had never broken it. What she did not know was that the promise itself had become the key to everything. And somewhere else in London, Victoria Harrington had just learned that at least one piece of evidence she believed destroyed still existed. Nathaniel Ashcroft had faced political rivals, hostile negotiations, and financial crises capable of shaking entire estates. None of them had followed him home the way Charlotte Hayes did. During the following week, he found her everywhere. Not physically. In thought. In memory. In questions he could not answer. He would sit through parliamentary discussions only to find himself recalling the expression on her face during the conservatory gala. He would review estate accounts and suddenly remember the physician's notes describing a frightened 13-year-old girl determined to protect everyone except herself. It was becoming a problem. A serious one. Nathaniel preferred logic. Order. Facts. Yet Charlotte existed increasingly beyond facts. She had become personal. That realization annoyed him more than he cared to admit. You are staring at the same page again. Hargrave's voice interrupted the silence of Blackthorn House's study. Nathaniel looked up. What? Hargrave nodded toward the ledger on the desk. 5 minutes. Nathaniel closed the book. Then perhaps it is a poorly written report. Hargrave almost smiled. Or perhaps your thoughts are elsewhere. Nathaniel offered no response. Hargrave had worked for him long enough to recognize silence as confirmation. You should speak with her. Nathaniel immediately frowned. About what? The truth. Which truth? Hargrave leaned back comfortably. Any of them. Nathaniel looked toward the window. Rain drifted softly across London. Spring was approaching. Yet the city still carried winter in its bones. She would not tell me. Probably not. Hargrave seemed entirely unconcerned. That does not mean you should stop asking. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel attended a charitable exhibition at the Royal Academy. The event attracted London's wealthiest families. Normally he tolerated such gatherings with professional patience. This evening he entered with a different purpose. He wanted answers. More specifically, he wanted to observe Charlotte without the chaos of public accusation surrounding them. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. She stood alone before a landscape painting near the Eastern Gallery. Sunlight streamed through painted clouds across a Yorkshire valley. Most visitors passed without stopping. Charlotte remained motionless, studying every detail. Nathaniel found himself slowing instinctively. Something about her solitude bothered him now. Months earlier he would not have noticed. Now he noticed every time. "You seem disappointed." Charlotte glanced toward him. "Your Grace." "The painting?" Nathaniel nodded toward the canvas. Charlotte smiled faintly. The artist chose the easier ending. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "For a landscape. The storm is leaving." She pointed toward the horizon. The more interesting version would have shown it arriving. Despite himself, Nathaniel laughed softly. Charlotte looked surprised. As though she had forgotten he could. "That is an unusually pessimistic interpretation." "Realistic." "Those are not always the same thing." For a moment neither spoke. The gallery around them remained pleasantly quiet. Guests wandered between exhibits. Soft conversations echoed beneath high ceilings. The atmosphere felt unexpectedly peaceful. "How is the school?" Nathaniel asked. Charlotte blinked. "You know about the school." "I know it received funding." A careful answer. "Technically true." Charlotte studied him for a moment. Something suspicious flickered across her expression. "Anonymous funding." "Yes." "Interesting coincidence." Nathaniel kept his face neutral. "Coincidences occur." "Not usually in groups." The comment landed closer to truth than he preferred. Before either could continue, another voice interrupted. "Miss Hayes." Charlotte turned. A young gentleman approached carrying obvious admiration in his expression. Nathaniel recognized him immediately. Arthur Beaumont. Wealthy. Well-connected. Popular. The sort of man society found effortlessly charming. Nathaniel disliked him instantly. The realization arrived so suddenly that it startled him. Arthur smiled warmly. "I hoped you would attend." Charlotte returned the smile. Not the polite smile she used for strangers. A genuine one. Nathaniel found himself irrationally irritated. "Mr. Beaumont." Arthur offered his arm. "Would you join me for refreshments?" Charlotte hesitated only briefly. "Thank you." Together they moved toward the adjoining reception room. Nathaniel remained where he was, staring after them. Hargrave's earlier observation returned with uncomfortable force. This had become personal. Worse, it had become emotional. The realization settled heavily in his chest. Across the room, Charlotte glanced back once. Only once. She immediately regretted it. Because Nathaniel was still watching. Their eyes met across the crowded gallery. Then Arthur spoke again, drawing her attention away. Yet the image lingered. The following day brought another surprise. A shipment arrived at the Southwark School shortly after breakfast. New textbooks. Scientific equipment. Maps. Supplies worth hundreds of pounds. The headmaster nearly appeared ready to faint from gratitude. Charlotte examined the delivery records carefully. No sender. No signature. No explanation. Just as before. "Whoever this benefactor is," the headmaster said, "they seem determined to help." Charlotte ran her fingers across the paperwork. "Determined?" "Yes." "Anonymous?" "Also yes." She was becoming increasingly certain she knew who stood behind the generosity. Proving it remained another matter. 2 days later she received confirmation. Indirect confirmation. The most frustrating kind. She arrived unexpectedly at a committee office to collect documents and discovered 2 gentlemen already there. One was the committee treasurer. The other worked for Blackthorn Estate. Charlotte recognized him immediately. The men did not notice her at first. His Grace requested discretion. The estate representative lowered his voice. The funds are not to be traced publicly. Charlotte froze. Of course. The treasurer nodded. The school will survive because of him. Silence followed. Then Charlotte quietly stepped backward before either man noticed her. By the time she reached the street, her emotions had become hopelessly tangled. Gratitude. Frustration. Confusion. Why would Nathaniel help while refusing to admit it? Why protect institutions connected to her while maintaining distance everywhere else? The contradiction made no sense. Unfortunately, it also made her think about him far more than she should. That evening she sat beside the drawing room fire pretending to read. The effort failed completely. Every page blurred. Every thought returned to the same man. Somewhere across London, Nathaniel experienced a remarkably similar problem. You are doing it again. Hargrave stood near the study door. Nathaniel looked up sharply. Doing what? Thinking about her. Nathaniel sighed. You are becoming insufferable. I am becoming correct. Hargrave appeared entirely pleased with himself. Nathaniel considered throwing something. Instead, he returned to the report in front of him. Unfortunately, the report concerned Charlotte. Hargrave noticed immediately. My point exactly. Before Nathaniel could formulate a response, another servant entered carrying correspondence. Most letters proved routine. One did not. Nathaniel opened it and immediately straightened. Hargrave noticed the change. News. Nathaniel read the page again. Possibly. He handed over the document. Hargrave reviewed it carefully. Then frowned. The missing records. Nathaniel nodded. The report came from Manchester. Investigators had located another witness connected to the original accusations. Unlike previous witnesses, this one had not disappeared. More importantly, he possessed information. Significant information. Can he prove anything? Hargrave asked. Nathaniel's gaze narrowed. Perhaps. For the first time in weeks, genuine progress seemed possible. Meanwhile, Victoria Harrington received troubling news of her own. The meeting took place in a private sitting room away from curious servants. Mr. Simmons looked nervous before he even spoke. Victoria hated that expression. Nervous people made mistakes. What happened? She asked. Simmons swallowed. The witness in Manchester. Silence. What about him? Someone found him first. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. Who? Simmons hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. The Duke. The room suddenly felt smaller. Warmer. More dangerous. Victoria crossed slowly toward the fireplace. Her reflection stared back from the mirror above the mantel. Calm. Composed. Elegant. She no longer felt any of those things. Nathaniel Ashcroft was not supposed to care this much. That had been the original assumption. The original advantage. He would remain distant. Objective. Detached. Instead, he had become involved. Worse, he was becoming protective. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. This was no longer merely about Charlotte Hayes. It had become something else entirely. The realization frightened her more than she wished to admit. The following morning Charlotte received a letter. Unlike previous anonymous messages, this one carried a familiar seal. Blackthorn House. Her pulse reacted before she could stop it. She unfolded the note carefully. Miss Hayes, I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss several matters with you. The subject concerns evidence recently uncovered regarding the accusations made against you. If convenient, please join me at Blackthorn House tomorrow afternoon. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Charlotte read the letter twice. Then a third time. Margaret entered moments later and immediately recognized the seal. Well. Charlotte handed over the note. Margaret read silently. Then smiled. Interesting. Charlotte looked away. It is probably about the investigation. Of course it is. The older woman sounded entirely unconvinced. Charlotte ignored her. Or tried to. The effort proved unsuccessful. Because after months of conflict, suspicion, misunderstandings, and unanswered questions, she suddenly found herself anticipating tomorrow. That realization was almost as unsettling as the scandal itself. Outside, London moved beneath grey skies and gathering spring winds. Somewhere in Manchester, a witness prepared to tell the truth. Somewhere in Mayfair, Victoria Harrington searched desperately for a way to stop it. And inside Blackthorn House, Nathaniel Ashcroft stood at his study window wondering why the thought of seeing Charlotte Hayes tomorrow mattered more than the evidence he had finally obtained. Charlotte arrived at Blackthorn House precisely at 2 o'clock the following afternoon. She had considered cancelling 3 separate times before leaving home. By the time her carriage rolled through the wrought iron gates, she had almost convinced herself the visit was a mistake. Almost. Blackthorn House stood among the most impressive residences in Mayfair. Built from pale stone and surrounded by immaculate gardens, it reflected centuries of power and wealth. Charlotte noticed none of that. Her attention remained fixed on the questions waiting inside. A footman escorted her through a grand entrance hall and into Nathaniel's study. The room reflected its owner perfectly. Organized. Elegant. Restrained. Books lined entire walls. Maps covered one corner. Large windows overlooked the gardens beyond. Nathaniel stood near the fireplace when she entered. He set aside a document immediately. Miss Hayes. Your Grace. For a moment neither moved. The months between them seemed to fill the room. Accusations. Arguments. Misunderstandings. Unanswered questions. Nathaniel finally gestured toward a chair. Thank you for coming. Charlotte sat carefully. Your letter suggested new evidence. Nathaniel remained standing for several seconds before taking the seat opposite her. His expression appeared unusually serious. It did. He reached for a leather folder resting nearby. The witness in Manchester has spoken. Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. And? Nathaniel opened the file. He admitted accepting payment. Relief flickered briefly inside her. Then caution replaced it. One witness was not enough. Not yet. Nathaniel continued. He also provided names. Charlotte leaned forward slightly. Whose names? Nathaniel studied her face for a moment. Intermediaries connected to Lady Harrington. Silence settled heavily between them. Charlotte had expected it. Hearing it confirmed felt entirely different. Can he prove it? She asked quietly. Nathaniel nodded once. Partially. He passed several documents across the desk. Charlotte reviewed them carefully. Statements. Financial records. Dates. Connections. None alone would destroy Victoria's scheme. Together they formed something far more dangerous. A pattern. For the first time in months, Charlotte saw a path toward the truth. She lowered the papers slowly. You were right. Nathaniel looked surprised. About what? Someone built this deliberately. A faint shadow crossed his expression. Yes. The answer carried more weight than the single word should have. Charlotte looked down at the evidence again. Then back at him. You have been helping me. Nathaniel went very still. There it was. The question he had known would eventually arrive. Charlotte watched him carefully. The school. Silence. The debts. More silence. The donations. Nathaniel looked toward the window. For perhaps the first time since she had met him, uncertainty appeared in his expression. Genuine uncertainty. Those matters were practical. Charlotte almost laughed. Practical. Institutions should not suffer because of false accusations. That was not what I asked. Nathaniel met her gaze again. Something unspoken passed between them. Then he exhaled slowly. Yes. The answer came quietly. No excuses. No explanations. Just honesty. Charlotte stared at him. Months earlier she would have celebrated the confirmation. Instead she felt something far more complicated. Gratitude. Confusion. Frustration. Relief. Why? Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. Because someone needed to. Charlotte looked away first. The simplicity of the answer somehow affected her more than any elaborate explanation could have. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt different now. Less hostile. Less guarded. Nathaniel finally broke it. There is something else. Charlotte's attention returned immediately. Nathaniel hesitated. A rare occurrence. The records from your childhood. Every muscle in her body went still. The change was immediate. Visible. Nathaniel noticed. Of course he noticed. I found the physician's notes. Charlotte looked toward the fire. For a long moment she said nothing. The room seemed smaller suddenly. Harder to breathe in. You had no right. Nathaniel accepted the criticism without argument. Probably not. Then why investigate? His answer came quietly. Because I was trying to understand you. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. The honesty made everything worse. Easier to dismiss anger. Harder to dismiss sincerity. There is nothing to understand. That is not true. She stood abruptly and crossed toward the window. Outside, spring sunlight touched the gardens. Inside, old memories pressed against carefully built walls. The past is irrelevant. Nathaniel rose as well. The past is never irrelevant when it still shapes the present. Charlotte laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. You sound like a physician. I spoke with one. That surprised her enough to turn around. Nathaniel continued before she could respond. Charlotte. The use of her first name caught her off guard. He seemed to realize it immediately. Yet neither acknowledged it. Whatever happened? His voice softened. You should not have faced it alone. The words landed harder than any accusation ever had. Charlotte looked away. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Because sympathy threatened defenses that judgment never could. I was not alone. The answer sounded weak even to her. Nathaniel said nothing. He simply waited. Charlotte hated that. The patience. The understanding. The way he never rushed silence when something important hid inside it. Finally she spoke. My father died. Nathaniel remained still. Afterward everything changed. The words emerged slowly. Carefully. Like opening a door long sealed shut. My mother remarried. She swallowed. The man she chose was admired by everyone. Nathaniel listened without interruption. Charlotte stared toward the garden beyond the window. People believed what they saw. A faint smile touched her lips. Sad. Tired. People usually do. Nathaniel's chest tightened unexpectedly. Because for the first time he understood that her distrust of society had not begun with recent scandals. It had begun years earlier. Emily was young. Charlotte continued softly. She deserved a normal childhood. Nathaniel remembered the photograph Hargrave had discovered. Two sisters smiling beneath summer sunlight. One protecting the other without either realizing it. So you protected her? Charlotte nodded. Someone had to. Silence followed. Heavy. Honest. Nathaniel wanted to ask more. He did not. Some truth required space. Charlotte eventually returned to her chair. The conversation shifted back toward evidence. Toward Victoria. Toward practical matters. Yet something fundamental had changed. The distance between them no longer felt quite as vast. Unfortunately, the afternoon brought another surprise. A servant entered carrying a telegram. Nathaniel accepted it absently. Then his expression changed. Charlotte noticed immediately. What happened? Nathaniel read the message again. His jaw tightened. The witness. Charlotte's pulse dropped. What about him? Nathaniel looked directly at her. He has disappeared. The room fell silent. Charlotte stared. Disappeared? Nathaniel nodded grimly. He left Manchester early this morning. Did anyone see where he went? No. Charlotte felt hope slipping away again. Not entirely. Yet enough. Every time the truth approached, something happened. Another witness vanished. Another record disappeared. Another trail ended. Nathaniel folded the telegram carefully. There is more. Charlotte braced herself. The final evidence he promised to provide is gone. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Charlotte laughed softly. Exhaustion colored the sound. Of course it is. Nathaniel watched her carefully. This is not over. No. Charlotte looked toward the fading sunlight. It never seems to be. Later that evening, after returning home, Charlotte made a decision. The realization arrived quietly. Without drama. Without anger. Simply certainty. She could not continue living inside this endless cycle of accusations and investigations. She was tired. Tired of defending herself. Tired of waiting. Tired of hoping. When Margaret found her packing several books into a travel case, she immediately understood. You are leaving? Charlotte nodded. For a while. Where? Yorkshire. The answer came easily. Emily. Safety. Distance. Silence. Margaret studied her carefully. Running away does not sound like you. Charlotte smiled sadly. Perhaps I am finally learning. Yet even as she spoke, part of her knew the truth. She was not fleeing society. She was fleeing disappointment. Because somewhere during these past months, Nathaniel Ashcroft had become important. Important enough to hurt. Important enough that every setback felt personal. Across London, Nathaniel stood alone in his study staring at another report detailing another vanished witness. Frustration simmered beneath his composure. For months he had pursued evidence. Now the trail seemed to be collapsing again. Then a second message arrived. Hargrave's handwriting. Urgent. Nathaniel opened it immediately. The note contained only one sentence. Miss Hayes has purchased a rail ticket for Yorkshire departing tomorrow morning. For the first time all evening, genuine alarm moved through him. Charlotte was leaving. And suddenly the missing witness no longer felt like the most important thing he might lose. Nathaniel Ashcroft reached King's Cross Station 11 minutes before Charlotte's train departed. For a man who built his life around precision, punctuality, and control, arriving with only 11 minutes to spare felt dangerously close to failure. Steam drifted beneath the vast iron roof. Porters hurried between platforms. Travelers exchanged hurried farewells while conductors called final boarding instructions. The station pulsed with movement and noise. Nathaniel noticed none of it. His attention remained fixed on one objective. Find Charlotte before she left London. Hargrave stepped beside him. Platform 4. Nathaniel nodded once and immediately moved through the crowd. The journey from Blackthorn House had been a blur. One thought had driven him relentlessly forward. If Charlotte left now, everything changed. The investigation. The evidence. More importantly, whatever fragile connection had begun forming between them. He reached platform 4 just as passengers started boarding. Relief appeared briefly, then vanished. Charlotte stood near a first-class carriage speaking quietly with Margaret. A travel case rested beside her. The sight struck him harder than expected. She looked calm. Resolved. As though the decision had already become final. Charlotte noticed him almost immediately. Surprise flashed across her face. Then confusion. Then something more complicated. Nathaniel slowed his pace as he approached. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. Your Grace. Nathaniel inclined his head. Mrs. Hayes. Charlotte folded her gloves carefully. I did not expect to see you here. Clearly. For a moment nobody spoke. The sounds of the station seemed to fade. Nathaniel looked at the travel case. Then back at her. You are leaving. Charlotte glanced toward the train. Only for a while. Without telling anyone. I did not realize permission was required. Despite the tension, a faint smile almost touched Nathaniel's face. Almost. It is not. Charlotte studied him carefully. Something felt different. He appeared tired. More serious than usual. More urgent. Why are you here? The question lingered between them. Nathaniel looked directly at her. Because I found something. Charlotte's attention sharpened immediately. The witness. No. Nathaniel shook his head. Something better. Before he could continue, Hargrave approached carrying a leather document case. Nathaniel accepted it and removed several papers. Charlotte recognized one instantly. The physician's statement from Dr. Whitaker. Her pulse quickened. How did you get that? You are not the only person who kept records. Nathaniel handed over additional documents. Charlotte reviewed them slowly. Medical reports. Estate records. Financial transfers. Private correspondence. As she read, confusion gave way to disbelief. These were connected. Nathaniel nodded. Every piece. Charlotte looked up. I do not understand. Nathaniel took a breath. Then explained. The missing evidence had never been hidden in a single place. Victoria Harrington had spent months eliminating obvious threats. Witnesses. Statements. Financial records. Yet she missed one thing. Patterns. The documents revealed repeated connections between people involved in the accusations and a network of payments originating through intermediaries linked directly to the Harrington family. None of the records alone proved guilt. Together they created something far stronger. A map. A complete picture. Charlotte listened carefully. Every new detail tightened the knot inside her chest. This proves it, she asked quietly. Nathaniel's expression darkened. It proves enough. Hargrave stepped forward. There is more. He removed another document. Charlotte accepted it. Her breath caught immediately. A signed statement. The missing clerk. The same man who had previously accused her. According to the document, he had been paid to fabricate evidence. Paid by representatives working on Victoria's behalf. How? Charlotte whispered. Hargrave allowed himself a rare smile. The man developed a conscience. For several seconds Charlotte could not speak. Months of accusations. Months of humiliation. Months of watching her life unravel. Suddenly the truth stood before her in black ink. Real. Tangible. Proven. Margaret pressed a hand against her chest. Thank God. A whistle echoed through the station. Conductors called final boarding instructions. The train preparing to leave for Yorkshire. Charlotte looked toward it instinctively. Then back at the documents. Then finally at Nathaniel. "Why now?" she asked softly. Nathaniel understood the question immediately. Why chase this so relentlessly? Why continue when easier paths existed? Why care? For once he answered honestly. Because they were wrong about you. Charlotte felt something shift inside her. Dangerous. Warm. Impossible to ignore. Nathaniel continued before silence could become something larger. The evidence has already been delivered to the appropriate authorities. Charlotte blinked. Already? This morning. Hargrave nodded confirmation. Several individuals are currently answering difficult questions. For the first time in months, genuine hope entered the conversation. Real hope. Not cautious optimism. Not desperate wishing. Hope built upon facts. Another whistle sounded. Passengers boarded quickly. Yet Charlotte no longer looked at the train. Her attention remained fixed on Nathaniel. "Then it is over?" she asked. Nathaniel exchanged a glance with Hargrave. Neither answered immediately. Charlotte's stomach tightened. What? Nathaniel looked toward the far end of the platform. Not quite. A familiar voice interrupted before he could explain. How dramatic. Every muscle in Charlotte's body froze. She turned slowly. Victoria Harrington stood several yards away. Elegant as ever. Composed as ever. Yet something in her expression had changed. The confidence appeared brittle now. Forced. Several passengers paused nearby, sensing tension immediately. Nathaniel stepped slightly closer to Charlotte. The movement happened naturally. Instinctively. Neither seemed aware of it. Victoria smiled faintly. Imagine my surprise. Hargrave moved forward. Lady Harrington. Victoria ignored him. Her gaze remained fixed on Charlotte. You always were difficult to remove. Charlotte stared in disbelief. Remove? Victoria laughed softly. Do not pretend innocence now. The station suddenly felt silent despite hundreds of people surrounding them. Victoria's smile faded completely. Everything should have worked. Her voice carried a bitterness Charlotte had never heard before. The rumors. The letters. The witnesses. Nathaniel's expression hardened. You are admitting quite a lot. Victoria looked at him. Genuine anger flashed across her face. You were never supposed to involve yourself. There it was. The truth beneath everything. Not just resentment toward Charlotte. Resentment toward anyone who refused the story she created. Charlotte felt a strange sadness settle over her. Months of suffering. Months of destruction. All because one woman wanted control. Wanted victory. Wanted attention. Victoria shook her head slowly. She had nothing. Her gaze returned to Charlotte. No title. No fortune. No influence. Yet somehow people always chose her. The confession revealed more than evidence ever could. Envy. Long-standing and poisonous. Nathaniel stepped forward. This conversation is over. Victoria laughed again. The sound seemed hollow now. Defeated. No. Her eyes moved briefly across the gathered crowd. More people were watching now. Far more. It is just beginning. Before anyone could respond, uniformed officials appeared at the far entrance to the platform. Victoria saw them immediately. So did everyone else. Silence followed. Then realization. For the first time since Charlotte met her, Victoria looked genuinely afraid. The officials approached steadily. No rush. No drama. Only certainty. Victoria's composure cracked completely. Not dramatically. Not publicly. Just enough. She looked at Charlotte one final time. You should have disappeared when you had the chance. Charlotte met her gaze calmly. You should have told the truth. The words landed harder than any accusation. Victoria looked away first. Moments later the officials escorted her from the platform. No scene. No struggle. No spectacle. Only consequences. The crowd slowly erupted into whispers. Questions spread instantly. Names. Rumors. Explanations. For once, none targeted Charlotte. She stood motionless as the reality settled around her. It was over. Truly over. Nathaniel watched her carefully. Relief appeared. Then exhaustion. Then something heartbreakingly vulnerable. Months of pressure suddenly lifting all at once. Charlotte. She looked at him. Grey eyes held hers steadily. You do not need to leave. The station disappeared. The crowd disappeared. Even the waiting train seemed distant. Only those words remained. You do not need to leave. Charlotte swallowed hard. Because for the first time in a very long time, she realized she no longer wanted to. Above them, steam drifted beneath the station roof while passengers hurried toward destinations across England. Yet neither moved. Neither looked away. And as the train to Yorkshire finally pulled away from the platform without her aboard, Nathaniel received a message from a breathless courier pushing through the crowd. Hargrave accepted it first. Read it. Then looked sharply toward Nathaniel. What is it? Nathaniel asked. Hargrave handed over the note. Nathaniel read silently. His expression changed immediately. Charlotte noticed. Another problem. Nathaniel folded the paper slowly. Not a problem. For the first time in months, something close to satisfaction touched his face. The final witness has been found. Charlotte stared. Nathaniel looked back at her. And he is ready to speak before all of London. The announcement spread through London in less than 24 hours. By the following evening, nearly every influential family in the city had heard the news. A formal gathering would take place at Ashcombe House. New evidence regarding the scandal surrounding Charlotte Hayes would be presented publicly. Attendance was by invitation. Yet invitation seemed almost unnecessary. Curiosity alone guaranteed a crowd. Charlotte stood before the mirror in her bedchamber while Margaret adjusted the final ribbon on her gown. Outside, the city hummed with anticipation. Inside, silence lingered. You are nervous. Charlotte smiled faintly. A little. Margaret stepped back and studied her. Good. Charlotte laughed softly. Good? It means you still care. The answer settled gently between them. Charlotte looked at her reflection. For months she had imagined this moment. Vindication. Truth. Justice. Yet now that it had arrived, her emotions felt strangely complicated. Relief existed. Certainly. So did gratitude. Yet another feeling lingered beneath everything else. Nathaniel. The realization appeared with uncomfortable honesty. Somewhere along the way, the investigation had stopped being solely about proving her innocence. It had become intertwined with a man she never expected to trust. A man she had challenged. Resented. Misjudged. A man who had slowly become impossible to ignore. Ashcombe House glittered beneath hundreds of candles that evening. Carriages lined the street outside. Footmen moved efficiently through crowds of arriving guests. Crystal chandeliers illuminated every corner of the grand ballroom. The atmosphere carried a peculiar mixture of excitement and unease. Society loved a scandal. Society loved a reversal even more. Charlotte arrived with Margaret shortly before 8 o'clock. Conversations immediately shifted. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Yet something had changed. The expression she encountered no longer carried certainty. Many looked embarrassed. Others looked curious. A few appeared genuinely ashamed. Charlotte accepted greetings politely. She offered smiles where appropriate. Yet her attention searched the room instinctively. Nathaniel stood near the far side of the ballroom speaking with Lord Ashcombe and several legal representatives. He wore formal evening attire. Dark. Impeccable. Controlled. Yet when his gaze found hers across the crowded room, something softened immediately. The moment lasted only seconds. Still, Charlotte felt it. So did he. Before either could move closer, the evening officially began. Lord Ashcombe stepped forward and requested attention. Gradually the ballroom fell silent. Hundreds of guests turned toward the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice carried clearly. We gather tonight to address matters that have affected many members of our community. A murmur passed through the audience. Then silence returned. Nathaniel stepped forward next. Charlotte felt her pulse quicken. Every eye in the ballroom followed him. Authority seemed effortless for him. Yet tonight something felt different. More personal. More vulnerable. Several months ago, Nathaniel began, serious accusations emerged regarding Miss Charlotte Hayes. The room remained perfectly still. Those accusations influenced charitable institutions, professional relationships, and personal reputations. His voice remained calm. Controlled. Yet Charlotte sensed emotion beneath it. Many accepted those accusations without demanding proof. A few guests lowered their eyes. Nathaniel continued. Evidence collected during recent investigations now establishes that those accusations were fabricated. The words echoed across the ballroom. No one interrupted. No one questioned him. Nathaniel presented the documents methodically. Financial records. Witness statements. Forged correspondence. Payment trails. Connections to intermediaries acting on Victoria Harrington's behalf. Every piece supported the next. Every gap disappeared. The truth emerged with undeniable clarity. Charlotte watched faces change throughout the room. Shock. Embarrassment. Regret. Understanding. Some guests seemed unable to meet her eyes. Others appeared horrified by their own previous assumptions. The transformation felt surreal. Months of whispers collapsing beneath facts. Then the final witness stepped forward. The same witness recently recovered by investigators. The room listened as he described the scheme. Payments. Instructions. False testimony. Pressure applied to witnesses. Deliberate manipulation. When he finished speaking, silence settled heavily over the ballroom. No one could deny the truth anymore. It stood plainly before them. Nathaniel allowed several moments to pass. Then he spoke again. Miss Hayes committed no wrongdoing. His voice carried absolute certainty. Her reputation was attacked through deception. Her character was questioned without cause. Her contributions were ignored. Her integrity was doubted. Charlotte felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Because every sentence carried more than factual correction. It carried recognition. Recognition she had not received in months. Perhaps years. Nathaniel looked directly at the crowd. And many of us allowed it to happen. A ripple moved through the room. Genuine discomfort now. Not for Charlotte. For themselves. Lord Pembroke shifted uneasily. Lady Agnes lowered her gaze. Several others appeared equally ashamed. Nathaniel's attention moved slowly across the assembled guests. Then finally settled upon Charlotte. The room disappeared. At least it felt that way. Hundreds of people remained present. Yet suddenly there seemed to be only two. There is one further matter. His voice had changed. Softer now. More personal. Charlotte felt her heartbeat accelerate. Nathaniel stepped away from the documents. Away from the witnesses. Away from the formal presentation. Toward her. Confusion spread through the crowd immediately. Charlotte stood perfectly still. Nathaniel stopped several feet away. For perhaps the first time since she met him, uncertainty appeared openly in his expression. Not weakness. Honesty. Raw and unmistakable. "I owe an apology." The ballroom became utterly silent. Charlotte stared at him. So did everyone else. Nathaniel continued. "When the accusations began, I told myself I was being objective." His gaze never left hers. "I believed caution was wisdom. Distance was fairness." He exhaled slowly. "I was wrong." The admission stunned the room. Yet Nathaniel seemed completely unaware of anyone else. "You stood alone while people judged you." Charlotte felt emotion rise unexpectedly. Dangerous emotion. The kind she usually controlled. "You faced humiliation with dignity." His voice lowered further. "And I watched far too long before standing beside you." No one moved. No one spoke. Charlotte could barely breathe. Nathaniel took another step closer. "I told myself I needed proof." A faint, sad smile touched his face. "The truth is that I should have trusted the woman standing in front of me." Tears threatened suddenly. Charlotte hated tears. Especially in public. Especially now. Yet something about his honesty shattered defenses she had carried for years. Nathaniel saw it immediately. So did everyone else. The Duke of Blackthorn looked at her for a long moment. Then something extraordinary happened. The most powerful man in the room stopped pretending composure. His voice roughened slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough. "You once challenged me in front of half of London." A few guests smiled despite themselves. Charlotte remembered the moment instantly. So did everyone else. Nathaniel's eyes never left hers. "You were right." Silence followed. Deep. Emotional. Honest. Then he said the words no one expected. "I should have been the one to cry first." A collective breath swept through the ballroom. Charlotte stared at him. The memory returned vividly. The conservatory. The challenge. The humiliation. The impossible courage it required. Nathaniel offered the smallest smile. "You carried burdens that should never have belonged to you." His gaze softened further. "And somehow you remained kinder than the people who failed you." Charlotte could not speak. She was no longer certain she wanted to. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone saw her completely. Not the scandal. Not the rumors. Not the accusations. Her. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded paper. Charlotte recognized it instantly. The old physician's statement. The one document in years of hidden pain. Nathaniel held it carefully. Respectfully. "This document explains many things." His voice remained quiet. "But it does not define you." Charlotte felt tears slip free despite every effort. Nathaniel noticed. Yet unlike everyone else throughout her life, he did not ask her to hide them. "You survived." The words landed gently. That matters. Silence settled once more. Then Nathaniel lowered the paper. For the first time all evening, he seemed uncertain what to say next. The realization touched Charlotte unexpectedly. This man who commanded rooms, directed investigations, controlled vast estates, suddenly appeared vulnerable. Human. Real. It affected her more than any grand speech could have. Around them, the ballroom remained silent. Waiting. Watching. Hoping. Nathaniel finally offered a faint smile. "I suspect society owes you more than one apology." Soft laughter spread through the crowd. Genuine this time. Warm. Human. Charlotte laughed through tears she could no longer hide. The sound seemed to release something throughout the room. Tension eased. Shame softened. Conversations began again quietly. Yet one thing remained unchanged. Nathaniel's gaze never left hers. And as music slowly resumed in the distance and guests began absorbing everything they had witnessed, Charlotte realized something remarkable. The scandal was over. The truth was known. The humiliation had ended. Yet the most important part of her story was only now beginning. Spring arrived in London as though the city itself had finally exhaled. The cold grey skies that had lingered for months gradually surrendered to warmer sunlight. Gardens awakened. Trees along the avenues of Mayfair softened with new leaves. Windows opened. Carriages rolled beneath brighter afternoons. Everywhere, life seemed determined to begin again. Charlotte Hayes noticed the difference immediately. For the first time in nearly a year, she walked through London without whispers following her. Without curious stares. Without suspicion. People greeted her again. Shopkeepers smiled. Invitations arrived daily. Charitable organizations requested her guidance. The restoration of her reputation happened almost as quickly as its destruction. The contrast taught her an important lesson. Society could be remarkably inconsistent. Fortunately, she no longer measured her worth by its approval. 3 weeks after the gathering at Ashcombe House, Charlotte stood in the courtyard of the Southwark School watching children chase one another beneath the afternoon sun. Their laughter echoed across the grounds. New books filled classrooms. Repairs had transformed aging buildings. Enrollment had increased. The future looked brighter than it had in years. "You seem happy." Charlotte turned at the familiar voice. Nathaniel Ashcroft approached through the gate. A group of children immediately noticed him. Several whispered excitedly. One little boy attempted a bow so dramatic he nearly lost his balance. Nathaniel handled the attention with surprising patience. Charlotte smiled despite herself. "That is because I am." Nathaniel stopped beside her. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them had changed completely. Months earlier it carried tension. Now it carried understanding. "The headmaster tells me enrollment has increased." Nathaniel glanced toward the school building. "By nearly 30 students." Charlotte nodded proudly. "And every one of them deserves the opportunity." Nathaniel looked at her. "Not the school. Not the children. That sounds like something you would say." The warmth in his voice sent a familiar flutter through her chest. A sensation she had long ago stopped trying to ignore. They walked together through the courtyard while students returned to lessons. Sunlight filtered through budding trees overhead. The world felt remarkably peaceful. "Emily writes often." Charlotte glanced at him. "You have been corresponding with my sister." Nathaniel looked entirely unapologetic. "Occasionally." Charlotte laughed. "Should I be concerned?" "Probably." That earned another laugh. One of the things she had come to treasure most was discovering the version of Nathaniel few people ever saw. The man beneath the title. Beneath the authority. Beneath the reputation. He remained strong. Decisive. Protective. Yet he was also thoughtful. Dryly amusing. Unexpectedly kind. The realization had changed everything. As they reached the far end of the courtyard, Nathaniel stopped walking. Charlotte noticed immediately. Something in his expression had shifted. Serious now. Focused. Her heartbeat responded before he even spoke. "Charlotte." The use of her first name still affected her. More than it should. "Yes?" Nathaniel drew a slow breath. For perhaps the first time since she had known him, he appeared genuinely nervous. The sight felt so unusual she almost smiled. "There is something I need to ask you." Charlotte's pulse quickened. "All right." Nathaniel looked toward the children playing nearby. Then back at her. For most of my life, I believed strength meant carrying everything alone. The word surprised her. Nathaniel. He shook his head slightly. Let me finish. Charlotte nodded. Nathaniel's gaze remained steady. Honest. Vulnerable. Then I met a woman who spent her entire life doing exactly that. Emotion tightened unexpectedly inside her chest. Nathaniel continued. A woman who protected everyone around her. His voice softened. Including people who did not deserve it. Charlotte felt tears threaten immediately. She blinked them back. Nathaniel smiled faintly. You challenged me. Argued with me. Refused to fear me. Someone had to. The answer escaped before she could stop it. Nathaniel laughed softly. The sound carried warmth she would never grow tired of hearing. Exactly. Silence settled briefly. Then Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket. Charlotte's breath caught. He withdrew a small velvet box. For one suspended moment, the entire world seemed to stop. The courtyard disappeared. The sunlight disappeared. Even the sounds of the school faded into the distance. Only Nathaniel remained. I have spent months trying to imagine a future that does not include you. His voice remained steady despite the emotion beneath it. I have failed every time. Charlotte could no longer speak. Nathaniel opened the box. A ring caught the sunlight. Elegant. Timeless. Beautiful. Yet not nearly as beautiful as the sincerity in his eyes. Charlotte Hayes. The world held its breath. Will you marry me? Tears escaped immediately. This time she made no effort to hide them. Nathaniel's expression softened further. That is either a very good sign or a very concerning one. Charlotte laughed through the tears. The sound trembled. You are impossible. I have been told that before. Frequently. More than once. Charlotte shook her head. Then looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had started as an adversary. Become an ally. Then something infinitely more important. The man who saw her clearly. The man who stayed. The man who chose her when choosing her carried a cost. The answer had existed for weeks. Perhaps months. She simply needed courage to say it aloud. Yes. Nathaniel blinked once. As though confirming he had heard correctly. Yes? Charlotte smiled through tears and laughter. Yes. Relief crossed his face so openly that it stole her breath. The Duke of Blackthorn, feared by half of London, suddenly looked happier than she had ever seen him. Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger. Then simply stood there for a moment. Looking at her. Smiling. The children noticed first. One little girl gasped dramatically. Another pointed. Within seconds the entire courtyard erupted into applause and excited cheers. Charlotte covered her face, laughing helplessly. Nathaniel looked completely unprepared for celebrating school children. The sight made everyone laugh harder. News traveled through London with astonishing speed. By evening, invitations, congratulations, and flowers arrived almost continuously. By the following week, every major newspaper carried the announcement. Society reacted exactly as expected. Some expressed surprise. Others claimed they knew all along. Charlotte ignored all of it. For once, public opinion no longer mattered. Several months later, sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of a beautiful chapel in the English countryside. Friends gathered. Family gathered. Former critics gathered as well. Many arrived carrying sincere apologies. Charlotte accepted them with grace. Not because they deserved forgiveness. Because she deserved peace. Emily travelled from Yorkshire with her husband. Margaret cried before the ceremony even began. Hargrave looked deeply uncomfortable whenever anyone mentioned emotions. Nathaniel appeared entirely too pleased about that fact. The wedding itself felt perfect. Simple. Meaningful. Honest. When Charlotte walked down the aisle, she saw only one person. Nathaniel waited at the front of the chapel, watching her with an expression she would remember for the rest of her life. Not pride. Not triumph. Gratitude. As though he still could not believe she had chosen him. The ceremony passed in a blur of joy and emotion. Promises exchanged. Vows spoken. Futures joined. And when they finally emerged into sunlight as husband and wife, applause filled the air. Rose petals drifted around them. Laughter echoed across the chapel grounds. For the first time in many years, Charlotte felt completely free. 1 year later, the Duchess of Blackthorn stood beside a classroom window watching students read. The Southwark School had expanded again. Additional buildings had been constructed. Scholarships increased. More children received opportunities every year. Everything Charlotte once dreamed of was becoming reality. A familiar pair of arms settled gently around her shoulders. Nathaniel rested his chin near her temple. "You are thinking again." Charlotte smiled. "Always." Dangerous habit. She leaned comfortably against him. "I was remembering." Nathaniel waited. "The scandal?" Charlotte considered the question, then shook her head. "No." She looked toward the children filling the classroom with energy and possibility. "The ending." Nathaniel followed her gaze. "It was a good ending." Charlotte smiled. "Yes." Yet she knew the truth. The scandal had not been the ending. The humiliation had not been the ending. Even justice had not been the ending. The true ending arrived the moment she stopped standing alone. The moment someone looked at every scar, every mistake, every burden she carried and chose her anyway. Outside, sunlight flooded the school grounds. Children's laughter drifted through open windows. Life continued exactly as it should. And for Charlotte Hayes, that was more than enough.